Story 1.
Husband discovers wife's cheating, sets up ingenious revenge plan before ghosting her forever. It was April 1st, and Pitt drove tiredly along the dusty road toward the family cottage he shared with his wife, Patricia. He had just finished a 3-hour drive from his last job, and the cabin was conveniently on his way home. Patty was supposed to meet him there, but he'd left later than planned and now found himself driving in the dark. His new gig as a traveling college professor kept him apart from his wife, so he eagerly anticipated the weekend. Patty, freed from her demanding nursing job, was meant to arrive the day before to stock up the cottage. With her captivating brown eyes and slender yet fit figure, she often turned heads in her nurse's uniform. Pitt and Patty first crossed paths 7 years ago at his brother Tom's college graduation. Patty, newly enrolled in the nursing program, had come to support her friend Marcia, who was also graduating. Since Tom was dating Mara, the four ended up having dinner together, and Pitt and Patty immediately hit it off. Despite Patty's limited carnal experience, Pitt was more than willing to guide her. Their connection led to marriage just 10 months later. Pitt was drawn to Patty's magnetic personality. She was endlessly outgoing and effortlessly made friends. Lately, they'd been discussing starting a family and finding a home of their own, instead of renting. Arriving at the cottage, Pitt turned off onto a narrow road leading to a small lake, but, to his surprise, Patty's car wasn't there. He considered calling her, but the weak cell signal in the mountains made it futile. After parking, he retrieved his bag and headed to the door, knowing where the spare key was hidden. Inside, he noticed the place seemed deserted for quite some time. With darkness falling and a long drive ahead through the mountainous terrain, he opted to wait, thinking he might have misjudged Patty's arrival time. Then it hit him. It was April Fool's Day. They often teased each other on this day. Perhaps Patty planned to arrive later or wait until the next morning. Despite considering leaving, he chose to stay a bit longer. However, upon further inspection, he found no provisions stocked in the house. Frustrated, he decided to leave. As he stepped out of the house, he noticed headlights approaching along the road, assuming it was his wife's car. But as the vehicle drew nearer, he realized it was a blonde in a red sports car. "Did she take that joke too far?" he whispered to himself, addressing no one in particular. The compact car came to a halt at the entrance, and the window rolled down. "Are you Pitt Avery?" inquired the young woman. He chuckled. "I see, it's an April Fool's joke. Haha, I'll go along with it. Yes, I'm Pitt." Stepping out of the car, she struck a pose. "I'm not joking. I was hired to deliver this to you and wait for you to read it." She handed him a sealed envelope. "She didn't mention I was being served," he mused, still thinking it was part of the prank. "Pitt, darling," the letter began, "first and foremost, I want to express that today I love you more than ever. I believe we have a flawless marriage, and I've never entertained thoughts of making love with anyone else, though many men have made advances. My loyalty to you has never wavered. However, recently I found myself drawn to a new doctor at the university hospital. It's not love, dear, just a passing desire. I feel compelled to act on it to clear my mind. He's married with a young son, so there's no prospect of anything beyond this momentary attraction. He's as committed to his wife as I am to you. Today, I've left town with him for the weekend to address this urge and ensure neither of us strays into a serious affair. I've engaged Chantel, a high-end escort, to ensure you experience a similar level of passion, since I can't bear the thought of her being with you in our bed. I've arranged for a remote cabin instead. I'll be back home by 6 p.m. on Sunday, refreshed and ready to continue our life together. We'll never speak of this weekend and pretend it never occurred. I hope and pray you understand my need for this. I'm confident our love is resilient enough to carry us through this and beyond. My love is solely for you." Patty's postscript: "I'm without a phone, so please refrain from trying to contact or locate me." He read through the letter once more, confirming its authenticity. "Got a pen?" he asked. She grinned. "Sure, but you don't have to sign." "No, but you'll sign after I jot down that you delivered this to me with instructions from my wife, Patty Avery, and that she paid you to have closeness with me, and I declined. Just sign with your real name. I'll need to check your driver's license to confirm. I'll sign, but do you realize what you're turning down?" She chuckled, twirling to showcase her figure. He grabbed a pen from his briefcase and penned his statement. She frowned. "You're certain?" He brushed off her question. "Now, be cautious on your way back, as there are many animals on the road at night. And don't tell my wife I refused, otherwise she won't ask for a refund. My lips are sealed. Are you sure there's nothing I can do for you? You seem sweet and very likable." "No thanks, I have a lot to plan." She presented her driver's license and signed the letter. "Mind if I stay the night?" "I'm nervous about driving back along the dark road," she asked, revealing her name as Sarah Davis. He considered the risk. Okay, Sarah Davis, but strictly platonic. You'll sleep in a separate room. Any attempts at lovemaking and you're out. Wow, this is a first for me. This is great. I'm now considering becoming an escort since my college payment is due next week. I'm soon graduating from college with a degree in textile engineering. Is it true my friend is hiring textile engineers? Pass me your resume after you graduate and I'll see what I can do, she suggested. He noticed her smile but extended his hand. Sorry, no physical contact. That evening they shared food and drinks from the 3 bags Patty had instructed her to bring. They sat by the fireplace as he recounted his high school sweetheart turned wife and their once ideal romance, now tarnished. They soon relaxed, free from any pressure related to closeness, and bonded immediately. She proved to be a compassionate listener, sympathizing with his situation as a betrayed husband. He discussed their plans to start a family after she earned her master's degree in nursing and their aspirations to move out of their small rented apartment into a house. She noticed tears welling in his eyes, and breaking her promise not to touch him, Pitt finally succumbed, hiding his face from her view. Yet as she moved to embrace him, he found himself yielding to her arms. There was no hint of desire or longing in this moment. She simply sought to ease his anguish. Let it out, she encouraged, and for the next few minutes, he did just that before pulling away. I still won't, he asserted. I know. That's one of the things I admire about you. Now, may I share my story? Of course. We have all night, he replied. I was born into poverty in the mountains of Kentucky. My father toiled as a miner, and my mother took in laundry to make ends meet. Despite excelling in school, I began working odd jobs at 12. While my peers dated and socialized, I had to balance work with studies, and being flat-chested and slender, I attracted little attention from guys. Surprisingly, I entered college as a virgin, earning a scholarship for my prowess in math and science. However, to cover expenses and buy a car, I continued working. As I progressed through college, my body changed, and I started receiving date invitations. Pausing to sip from the wine they had found, she continued, lacking experience with guys, I made several missteps and they exploited me. I believed they cared for me, only to realize they sought only physical closeness. Eventually, I encountered someone who seemed genuine. He didn't rush physical intimacy, waiting until the 3rd date to even attempt a kiss. Everything appeared promising until Christmas break. He returned home without a word, leaving me in doubt. Yet, upon his return to school, he acted as if the hiatus never occurred. It took time, but I forgave him, and we began a physical relationship. One evening I confessed my love to him, but he didn't reciprocate verbally. Though he showed affection, he never voiced it, so I confronted him about it. He broke down in tears, apologizing for keeping me as his girlfriend here while he had another girlfriend back home, whom he proposed to. He admitted enjoying his time with me but couldn't decide, so I made the decision for him. You kicked his rusty-dusty butt? Pitt chuckled. Oh, absolutely. Right in front of our friends at the dinner table, but it left me disillusioned with relationships. Feeling the need for financial stability, my roommate suggested escorting. Initially, it was purely non-sexual, but the income wasn't sufficient, so I began providing manual pleasure. They didn't offer enough to engage in sleeping with someone until your wife offered me $3,000 to spend the weekend with you. She mentioned your prowess in bed and your above-average size, and here we are. But if I'm as skilled in bed as she claims, why resort to this? Pitt asked. I even questioned her, and she brushed it off as a peculiar whim, citing your relentless pursuit to keep her. She hired me to level the playing field. They lapsed into silence, reclining against the pillows, watching embers ascend the chimney. He draped his arm around her shoulders, planting a kiss on her forehead. Thank you. You've made the worst day of my life a tad better. She turned to meet his gaze. She's foolish and reckless for risking losing you like this. Let me tell you, good men are hard to come by. I just wish I could find you after this and embark on a new life. They hugged tighter, soon drifting off to sleep in each other's embrace. The following morning, Sarah awoke to the enticing aroma of sizzling bacon and found Pitt tending to the stove. Smells delicious, she remarked, rolling over to face him. He turned, asking, How do you like your eggs? Scrambled like our entire life now, she quipped, and they shared a laugh. He prepared some toast and brought the laden plates to the table. I've brewed some coffee if you're interested. Yes, please, but I really need to use the bathroom, she groaned, heading toward the nearest door and twisting the knob. Don't pee in the closet, he teased with a grin. You're making it hard, she retorted, crossing her legs and hurrying in small steps. That door, he indicated. The next one on the right. And while you're there, could you remove all that makeup and let your hair down? Boy, you're full of surprises, she grinned, quickening her pace. He heard the rush of water, and after a few minutes, she emerged looking natural, shedding the guise of Chantel for Sarah. Her skin glowed with a healthy flush, and her light brown hair cascaded freely. Much better. Why, didn't I at least turn you on? Hell yes! I'd have to be dead not to feel aroused. I just want to see Sarah, not Chantel. Pitt Avery, do you always say the right things? She remarked, indulging in a hearty meal, unconcerned with her appearance for once. I forgot how good bacon tastes, she added, assisting with the cleanup and retrieving her suitcase. I think it's time for me to bid farewell, he announced, stepping toward the door and blocking her path. Considering my wife paid you to spend the entire weekend with me, how about staying? But you said no. Closeness, she reminded him. I can't just wait around for her cheating self to return after betting that idiot of a doctor. So I'd prefer you stay, and we can use the time to get to know each other better. But I can't engage in closeness with you. That would make me no better than her, she protested. All right, but what shall we do? I'd enjoy talking to you, and I believe there are cards and board games in the closet outside the bedroom. We can also take a stroll and maybe go for a swim, he suggested. But I didn't bring a swimsuit, she noted with a smile. I said no closeness. Watching and fooling around isn't so bad, especially since I plan to divorce her once we return, he disclosed. Agreed, Mr. Avery. Please, call me Pitt. Where did that name come from? When I was born, my face resembled a pit bulldog's wrinkles, and my parents found it amusing. They could have named me Pug, which isn't much better, he chuckled. Your face looks rather handsome now, she teased. Who's speaking, Chantel or Sarah? Chantel's done. Please refrain from calling me that, she requested. Agreed. Patty felt nervous after writing a note to her husband and handing it to the escort. Dr. Evan gave her $22,000, but she topped it up with her personal funds to ensure she secured a reputable, clean escort. Opting for one who was inexperienced in carnal matters was a bonus. She didn't want to risk contracting any carnal-transmitted diseases. The paramour she planned to meet this weekend was set to pick her up around 6 in the evening. Pitt written to her early that morning to confirm his arrival at the cottage shortly before dusk. Chantel affirmed her arrival just after dark. Initially hesitant to risk losing her true love, Pitt, she relented after persuasion from Dr. Evan Peters, who assured her that, with an expensive escort, he would level the playing field and accept her. Her intention was for just one weekend, so they could proceed with their plans of buying a house and starting a family. Both sets of parents cherished Pitt like their own son, and vice versa. Everything was going well until she started feeling uneasy when Dr. Evan Peters arrived. She resisted until he cornered her in a storage room and kissed her. Their kissing session lasted for some time, and as he departed, he whispered, "Now you are mine." Evan arrived punctually, dressed casually. She hesitated to let him into the house, but he brushed past her, casually inspecting the premises. "Not bad for a teacher and future head nurse. A big cozy," he remarked. "Dr. Peters, we need to leave." "I don't want the neighbors spotting us here anymore," she urged. "Eager to get me into bed, huh?" he teased with a grin. "Actually, I've been craving it since this morning and need to tend to it before we go." "And please call me Dr. Evan now," he insisted. I don't think so. I want to leave immediately," she hesitated. Patty, I paid you handsomely to keep your betrayed husband occupied so you can do as I ask, right?" Realizing her obligation, she felt a twisted excitement at being instructed to commit such a vile act. "Okay here?" she asked, reaching for a zipper. "My husband isn't weak, and if you say anything more about him, our weekend is over," she warned. "Not here, in your bed," he countered, hurling insults at her husband. "No, please, not there, anywhere else," she pleaded. "Not an option. Look, if you don't want to please me here, why should I go away with you for 2 days?" Reluctantly, she led him to the bedroom, where he began undressing. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I thought you might want to see and touch my body first." Observing him disrobe, she noticed he sported an even tan, a flat stomach, and decent-sized biceps, but in the crucial department, he was average or below. Undressed, he reclined on the bed, hands behind his neck. This wasn't what she envisioned. It was meant to be romantic, roses, gentle caresses, massages, and plenty of foreplay. Instead, she fulfilled his desires with closed eyes. He proceeded to humiliate Pitt. "I bet your husband can't arouse you like I do. But now just think, you get this body for 3 days and 2 nights. Afterward, she hurried to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Mr. Hot Hunk transformed from Dr. Hyde to Mr. Jackal. Gathering herself, she returned to find him undressed on the marital bed. "We're done. I warned you not to speak ill of Pitt," she declared, snatching her clothes and exiting the room. "Damn," Evan muttered, hastily dressing. He realized he shouldn't have gone too far before reaching the resort, but he believed he still had the charm to win her back. Patty stood at the kitchen sink, tears welling in her eyes as she thought about her loving husband in bed with another woman, experimenting with things they never had. As dusk approached, she realized it was too late to intervene at the cottage. Her thoughts were interrupted by Evan's footsteps behind her. "Patty, baby, I'm so sorry about this. I thought you liked me being assertive. I promise never to mention him again. Let's start fresh and make this the best weekend ever." She felt his fingers massage her shoulders and leaned into him. "I don't want you to be assertive. I just want to feel loved by another man," she confessed, feeling his hands move from her shoulders to her chest. She considered asking him to leave, but realized she had already crossed a line. "Nothing more until we reach the resort," she insisted. After a lengthy walk, Pitt watched as Sarah began to remove her jeans to go swimming. "Look away," she blushed. He chuckled. "You must be kidding. How many men have seen you undressed?" "Screw you," she snapped, pulling on her jeans. "I told you, Chantel is gone and only Sarah remains," she declared tearfully, fleeing the house. "Sarah, please stop." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have laughed or said that. I see you're not Chantel anymore. I enjoyed meeting Sarah, and I want to get to know her better. But tell me, have men ever paid to sleep with you?" "I wasn't lying. You were supposed to be my last escort. Even then, I planned to have a lot of wine first. That was until I met you. Like I said, nice guys are hard to find. Let's start fresh. Hi, I'm Pitt. Nice to meet you." "I'm Sarah," she smiled softly. "How about we stroll around this beautiful lake?" They did just that, hand in hand, sharing their likes and dislikes. Both shared a love for Elton John and CCR, and they also had a passion for cooking and Mexican cuisine. Upon their return, they were both hot and sweaty. "Sarah, how about a swim in our underwear?" Pitt suggested. "Sure, I'd love to." She didn't need to ask him to turn around. He did it himself. He waited, hearing her steps and laughter. "Ha ha! Hurry up and catch me," she teased. Turning around, he shed his jeans and t-shirt, joining the playful chase. She sported only a tiny pink bra and matching strap underwear, giving the illusion of nudity with the strap underwear buried in her beautiful backside. "Wow, it's so cold," she exclaimed, taking the first step into the chilly water. As she turned toward him, his body collided with hers, sending them both into the water with a splash. He swiftly pulled her up. She coughed, having swallowed some water. "Cough." She tried to catch her breath. "Are you okay?" Pitt asked, patting her back gently. "Yeah, I'm fine," she smiled after a few moments before pulling him in for a passionate kiss. Their soaked underwear clung to their bodies, the cold water quickly becoming a distant sensation as their tongues intertwined, and their hands began to explore. Meanwhile, Evan whispered, "I have flowers and champagne in the trunk," as he and Patty headed towards the resort. Her phone buzzed, and she panicked, realizing she forgot to leave it at home. Expecting to see Pitt's name, she found it was just a spam call. She quickly powered off her phone to prevent tracking through apps. "Find your phone," she mumbled, closing her eyes and grappling with the image of Pitt with the enchanting Chantel. "Oh God, what have I done?" A few tears trickled down her cheeks. A song echoed in her mind. It's too late to turn back now. Evan checked in at the office, and moments later they arrived at the house. "Here we are, beautiful," he remarked, noticing her wiping her eyes. "Are you okay?" She couldn't meet his gaze. "Evan, I can't go through with this. I'm so sorry. I'll give you what you paid for." "Chantel, damn," he muttered softly, suppressing his anger as he reclined in his chair. "I understand, but the damage is done. He knows you're here with me now, so you might as well enjoy yourself. Either he has closeness with her or explodes. Either way, you better relax and figure out a plan to. Meet him on Sunday night. I won't force you into anything you don't want, and if you decide to go home tomorrow, I'll take you back." "Really? You won't get mad and tell everyone at work?" she questioned. "No, damn it, I don't want anyone at work spilling to my wife," he retorted. "Okay, I'll stay tonight and decide about Sunday, but let's not do anything too drastic." He grinned, realizing he still had a shot at experiencing the woman's enticing body. Yet for the first time, he grasped the potential consequence of an enraged husband contacting his wife. That was foolish. After the kiss, Sarah pulled back, giggling, and gestured toward the house, beckoning him to follow with a crook of her index finger. Observing his wet underpants, she discerned Patty hadn't exaggerated about his size. She had never been with someone so well endowed. Now he could admire her supple pink backside and ample chest. She certainly didn't resemble a textile engineer. Intelligence and beauty paired well, but catering to many men and engaging in paid hand jobs posed a significant drawback. This realization swiftly dampened his arousal. Rushing inside the house, he kindled logs in the fireplace while she fetched towels. Once the fire crackled, he turned to find her standing completely undressed, offering a large white towel. "Dry me and I'll return the favor." His fingers trembled as he caressed the soft fabric over her shoulders and arms. That feels amazing," she murmured. She had never felt such exhilaration with a man. Gliding the towel down her sleek back to the cleft of her backside, he marveled at her beauty. "You're so wet," he whispered, withdrawing his fingers from the towel and guiding them beneath her bottom. "Oh God, Pitt," she moaned, turning to meet his gaze, her lips glistening. "Please." Although she begged men, she didn't allow them the same liberties with her. Sensing his intent as his eyes closed and his mouth drew near, she recognized his uniqueness. By the time Evan and Patty returned from dinner next door, darkness had fallen. Switching on her phone, Patty anticipated a message from Pitt but found none. "Well, he didn't rush home," she remarked. "Heck, clearly enjoying the present," Evan commented, stepping behind her to massage her shoulders. "Chantel is adept at seduction." Patty closed her eyes, leaning back against him. "Have you ever, been with Chantel?" "No, and she was truthful about not engaging with anyone." "She knows my colleagues say she simply provides immense pleasure. She doesn't reciprocate or kiss on the lips. This might be her first time consenting to sleeping with someone." "Consenting? If I didn't know she was an escort, I might have fallen for her easily." "Oh God, no," Patty gasped. "This is what I feared. He can't fall for her." As his hands left her shoulders to wander lower, fondling her chest gently, she pushed him away and pivoted. "I want to." "Leave, Evan. Will you abandon me like this?" Taking her hand, he pressed it against him. "The deed is done, so let's enjoy ourselves and strategize on winning Pitt back. I feel accountable and want to assist." "Come closer," he urged, drawing her towards his sturdy frame. "I need to call him and clarify that I didn't sleep with you. I'll forgive him since I hired an escort. He should be back home tomorrow morning. I trust he loves me enough to understand it was a lapse." "I'm sure it'll work out," Evan fibbed. Suddenly, her body betrayed her as she pressed her lips to his neck. "We can just embrace each other, but first, I need a shower. Care to join?" She yearned to soap and rinse his impressive physique. "Yes," he replied promptly, aware that with enough play and kisses, he'd eventually have her. Here she was in a romantic cabin with the man she admired and desired. Patty felt hot water cascade from her forehead down her face, over her bare chest, and along her flat abdomen. Evan's hands spread soap across her back and white backside. This was precisely what she desired, to feel another man's touch, kisses, and caresses on her body. "It feels incredible," she purred. The young doctor pressed her against the wall, lifted her right leg, and began to caress it, and then they made love. Sarah woke first, finding herself nestled undressed against Pitt's solid back. "How fortunate I am," she mused. "Just one night with the man of her dreams, and I'm already attached to a man I've never experienced before." Pitt was immersed in a dream, or so he believed. Opening his eyes, he saw blonde hair cascading over his lower abdomen. After satisfying each other once more, they packed and prepared to depart. My soon-to-be ex-wife won't return until noon tomorrow. Perhaps after I settle back home and sort out some financial matters, we could rent a place in the city." "I was hoping you'd suggest that," she smiled, pressing her lips to his. "Sarah wants to know you better, but my roommate will be away for a few weeks. Why don't you come over? I don't think you want to be at home when they return." "I don't want to be a bother. Trust me, I want us to have the chance to talk more." Gathering their belongings, they set off along the winding forest road. The Saturday morning drive passed swiftly since she was already at Pitt's house. She didn't need to keep a close watch on him. Upon entering the garage door to the condo, he called out, "Honey, I'm home." "Let's hope she doesn't answer," Sarah said, not amused by his jest. While he tended to cutting ties with Patty, she explored the house, glimpsing their wedding photo above the fireplace and envisioning herself in the cheating wife's role. Pitt was still occupied in his home office when she entered the master bedroom and peeked into the spacious walk-in closet. Why would she risk everything for a fling with a younger man, she thought. "Take what you want," Pitt murmured, moving closer behind her, his lips grazing her earlobe. "I want to make love to you on the bed," her heart raced. "But I thought you weren't engaging in carnal sleeping with someone." "You're right, but I want to leave her a wet gift on the bed as a welcome home farewell." She smiled at the prospect of future encounters. "Why don't you undress and get comfortable on the bed while I slip into one of these alluring negligees?" It felt odd to lie on his own marital bed, awaiting not Patty but a stunning woman to join him. Anger overshadowed the sadness of his failed marriage. Just days ago, they had discussed starting a family. He knew he needed to stay away from her until he calmed down, if that ever happened. His gaze shifted to the dressing room door through which Sarah emerged, adorned in a nightgown identical to the one Patty had worn on their wedding night. Perfect. This time, their touches and kisses were deliberate and unhurried. Though refraining from sleeping with someone was challenging, it was crucial for him not to repeat Patty's mistakes. After they finished, a large wet spot marked the center of the bed. They remade it before departing. He discarded all photos of them together, along with the wedding album. Spotting her grandmother's diamond engagement ring in the nightstand, he pocketed it, leaving his own wedding band behind. He didn't leave a note, having nothing to say to the unfaithful Patty. She refused Dr. Evans's advances that night, but he persuaded her to stay until Sunday. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of marriage, revealing her lack of enjoyment and sense of obligation. Around noon on Sunday, he parked in front of her apartment. "Do you see his car?" She scanned the area. "No, that must mean he stayed with her, thank goodness," she sighed, taking his hand. "I'm sorry for spoiling our weekend. I love my husband too much to ever repeat this mistake." "I understand, and I feel the same about never straying from my wife again," he fibbed, fearing being caught. Patty refrained from kissing him goodbye, her gaze fixed on the condominium door. "Well, that's that. Time to start a family and grow old with my hubby," she thought, unaware of the truth. She took her small suitcase to the laundry, intent on washing away all traces and sense of her infidelity. The basket containing Pitt's dirty clothes from his trip escaped her notice, her mind consumed with what she would say to Pittsburgh. Only upon opening the nightstand drawer did she realize the absence of her wedding ring, replaced by his. "No, Sarah, you don't need to do this. I can book a hotel room for a few days." They sat together on the sofa, his left hand resting on her shoulder. She grasped his hand and leaned into his warmth. "You don't have to be alone. I enjoy being with you. It's strange, but I feel like we've known each other for ages," she expressed as he leaned in for a kiss, not of passion but of comfort. "You brought light into my darkest hour, Mike. Patty's brother is my best friend, so who knows how long this night will last. I was thinking about the money you took for this weekend. I want you to return it, but I need to settle my debts. No matter the amount, I'll pay you." "You didn't have to stay, but you did," he murmured before their moment was interrupted by the buzzing phone. "She's at home," he informed. "Aren't you going to answer?" she asked. "No, I'm done talking to her," he declared, deleting her message without reading it. Patty recognized that her only chance to salvage her marriage was through deception. She called his phone, leaving a message. When he didn't pick up, she began, "Pitt, honey, I know you're upset, but Dr. Evans and I didn't go all the way. We flirted, kissed, and touched, but that's it. He wanted more, but I stopped it. I realized how foolish I was. Despite your time with an escort, I forgive you. I came home early today and found your engagement ring, along with my wedding nightgown, on the closet floor. Please tell me you didn't let that woman wear it. It's sacred to our marriage. I don't know where you are, but please come home. I love only you. Your forever wife, Patty," she pleaded, exhausted from her encounter with Evan and anxious about facing Pitt. She opted to get some rest and pulled back the covers of their marital bed. "You idiot!" she yelled upon spotting the sizable wet stain. Its odor overwhelmed her senses, prompting a swift retreat to the bathroom where she emptied her stomach. She had vowed to refrain from lovemaking in their shared bed, and now her carefully crafted plans lay in ruins. Seizing a blanket from the closet, she descended the stairs and settled on the sofa. Upon awakening, darkness enveloped the room, with only the porch light casting a faint glow. Checking her phone for Pitt's response, she found a message from Evan. So did he relent or unleash hell? "Should I be concerned?" she pondered aloud, dialing Pitt's number with little regard for his whereabouts. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind his wedding ring, signaling a potential storm. "Damn it, Patty. We stand to lose everything, even our jobs. Is it true? Did he abandon his ring? It seems he brought Chantel here, defiled our bed, and discarded our photos." She fumed, foreseeing further retaliation from Pitt. "I messaged him that we didn't go all the way, so you might want to use that lie with your wife," Evan advised before disconnecting. As Evan settled to watch his son chasing fireflies in the backyard, he reflected on his miscalculation regarding Patty's husband. He had been certain that offering a stunning escort in exchange for his wife's silence would sway him, but he was sorely mistaken. The following day, Patty reached out to Pitt's parents in a desperate attempt to locate him, only to find they were clueless. Frustrated, she dialed her brother Mike. "Hey sis, how's it going? No, sorry, I haven't heard from him. Wait, what's happening?" Click. Later, during a trip to the store, she found her credit card had been declined. It became evident that he was distancing himself and had no desire to communicate. Despite sending him 2 more text messages and leaving voicemails, she received no reply. Unable to cope, she phoned the dean of Pitt's faculty, Roger, with whom they were familiar. Roger, it's Patty. Have you spoken to Pitt? After a brief silence, Roger expressed reluctance to intrude. Patty, I don't want to intrude. What did he tell you? All I know is he's dealing with personal issues and requested time off. He assured me he's okay. Roger's tone hinted at a lack of cheerfulness. Goodbye, Patty, he said before ending the call. Wait, I have a week off to clear my head, he informed Sarah, suggesting they dine at Silver's restaurant. Concerned about being spotted together, he suggested she wear one of his wife's alluring dresses. Upon entering the restaurant, he immediately spotted one of Patty's colleagues waiting for a table. The idea of leaving crossed his mind, but instead, he decided to stir up some rumors. It wasn't until she turned around that she noticed him, and the shocked expression on her face hinted that she was aware of Patty's weekend with Dr. Evan. Oh my God, hi Darlene, how's it going with David? David, her husband, was not the man beside her. Well, he's in Europe for a few weeks. Oh, this is Jack. He joined our team a few months ago around the same time as Dr. Evan. Yes, Jack grinned. We're the complete package. How do you know Darlene? Our table is ready, Darlene said, leading the man by the hand. Sarah also stumbled upon a troubling revelation. It seemed that Patty and Dr. Evan's clandestine affair had become public knowledge. Patty wept incessantly after receiving a call from her parents. Concerned, they reached out to Pitt's parents, and all 4 were anxious about the situation. Patty had to disconnect the call to numb the pain of losing her beloved. An hour later, her phone rang, and she hoped it was Pitt. It was Darlene. Patty, how was your weekend? It's awful, Dare. I tried to cancel everything, but it was too late. The closeness was good, but not as great as I expected. How's it going with Jack? Well, tonight will be the first time I'm calling because Pitt just walked into Silver's with a hot blonde on his arm. Damn, she must be the same escort we hired. He kept his wedding ring and canceled our credit cards. Why did I let Evan convince me to hire a call girl? Since he doesn't want to talk to me, I'm heading your way. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. She's staring at us, Sarah whispered, scanning her menu. She's on the phone, probably calling your wife. Don't call her my wife. My heart shattered when I read the letter she left. So, Sarah, have you met anyone interesting lately? Maybe, I'm still unsure. He seems nice, good in bed, and genuine. Well, the game isn't over yet. I'm hoping for a royal flush of hearts. She giggled, taking his large left hand in her small right one. Reaching out to him, they exchanged looks of adoration just as Patty's scream cut through the air. Get away from my husband and take off my damn dress. They were both so startled that Sarah failed to notice Patty's right hand aiming towards her face. Fortunately, Pitt caught this in the nick of time and swiftly deflected it. He seized Patty's right wrist and twisted it behind her back. Stop this now. The entire restaurant froze, falling into silence as all eyes turned to the disturbance. Patty suddenly went limp, losing consciousness, prompting Pitt to catch her. Darlene rushed over. I'm a nurse, so please step back and someone fetch me some water and a clean towel. A cold towel from the bar revived her. Initially disoriented, she soon recognized her surroundings. Upon seeing her husband, Patty cried, Pitt, honey, I'm here and I have your ring in my pocket. It's all a misunderstanding. I didn't sleep with Evan, but it's okay if you were with her. She glared at Sarah. Patty, sit down and drink this, Darlene murmured, handing her friend a glass of water. She glanced around for Jack, but he seemed to have vanished. Patty took a sip of water, her gaze fixed on Pitt, to approach the escort. Let's leave, Sarah. Her name isn't Sarah, it's Chantal, and she's a damn strumpet. Patty grabbed a glass of water and lifted her hand to throw it at the beautiful woman. Pitt stepped in front of Sarah, and the partly filled glass of water struck his upper left body. Thankfully, it didn't shatter until it hit the ground. Ow, he winced, realizing the impact was forceful. He shot a look at Patty and moved away from the broken glass, leading Sarah with him. The evening manager had a smartphone recording the whole scene. Pitt recognized him. Shan, send me a copy. You have my phone number, right? Yes, I wrote it down. Should I call Emer? They're on their way, the administrator said. I dialed emergency when the woman fainted. What happened? Asked the paramedic, a pretty woman carrying her medical bag as she approached Patty, who was seated on the floor with support from Darlene. She fainted, Darlene explained. I'm a nurse, and her pulse is very high. She needs her blood pressure checked. Also, I think she injured her right elbow and head when she fell. While the female paramedic attended to Patty's vitals, her partner approached Pitt, who was in pain, attempting to move his shoulder. The bartender was clearing the broken glass. Pitt, honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. Let's go home and I'll make it up to you for this weekend, Patty sobbed. You've caused enough damage for today. You have until tomorrow evening to gather your things and leave the apartment. Get a lawyer because it's over between us. Sir, you need to go to the emergency room for an x-ray, the male paramedic advised. It appears you may have a cracked collarbone. Darlene called Patty's brother Mike to come and speak with her sister, who refused to go to the hospital where she worked. They both knew rumors would circulate. 10 minutes later, Mike arrived, but Pitt and Sarah had already departed. What on earth happened? Oh my God, Mike, Pitt just left for the hospital with the escort I hired. I hit him with a glass. He said not to come home. What? You're not making sense, ma'am. I see only bruises on your arm and there are no marks on your head. Are you feeling any pain? Only in my heart. I just lost the man I loved. Pitt had his hands full dealing with Patty, who was resisting divorce to pursue Sarah. After she assaulted him with a glass of water, he obtained a restraining order, which she accepted when he threatened to expose the letters and messages implicating her and Dr. Evan in hiring an escort for him over the weekend in exchange for their own escapades until they passed out. The infidelity charge stuck due to Pitt's evidence. Sarah refunded the cheaters for the escort services, which led the judge to deny alimony and rule in a 70-30 split in Pitt's favor. Since it was Dr. Evan's second affair, his wife got the lion's share and he got the rest. He lost his job at the hospital and ended up working night shifts at a local medical pharmacy. Predictably, Patty suffered a nervous breakdown, taking over a year to accept the end of her marriage to Pitt. Whenever a man entered her room, she hoped it was Pitt coming to take her home. She started dating again, but none could fill Pitt's void. Her biggest regret was hiring an escort who later fell for him. Upon retirement, she relocated to the Villages, Florida, and became an expert in bingo. Sarah graduated with distinction from university and relocated to North Carolina to avoid the judgmental stares and derogatory remarks she encountered. Sharing an apartment with a fellow graduate, she was employed as an engineer when there came a knock on her door. Assuming it was a neighbor, she was taken aback to find Pitt standing there, holding a sizable bunch of pink roses with a card addressed to her bearing the name Sarah. It had been a year since their initial meeting, during which they had exchanged only a handful of messages. "Oh my gosh, what's happening? Why? I'm confused," exclaimed Sarah. Pitt hired a private investigator to track Sarah and learned that she spent most of her time at work, rarely dating and quitting her escort job. He aimed to finalize his divorce before considering his future. Despite attracting many women, he couldn't shake off the memories of his troubled past with Patty. Reflecting on his moments with Sarah, he decided to take a chance. "Hi, ma'am, I'm Pitt. Pleased to meet you," he greeted with a smile that warmed her heart. Sarah played along, asking, "How do you know my name and where I live? Is this some kind of April Fool's joke?" She yearned to embrace him. Pitt explained, "I was in Kentucky and asked about a blonde named Davis." The man mentioned Samuel Davis, a retired miner, whose daughter-in-law, Sarah Sue, is a major engineer in North Carolina. "I wanted to talk to your brother." Pitt chuckled. "Not exactly, but close. It's not a prank. I spoke to your father and got his blessing." Sarah's eyes teared up, her smile radiant. "Yes. My answer is yes."
Story 2.
I caught my wife cheating with a CO worker. I recorded it and now she's facing divorce. I think my coworker may have an affair with my wife and it's looking like it may be true. I'm a 36-year-old man, and in 2014, I had a chance encounter with my now wife, who is 32 years old, at a local mall. Let's call her Gabby. Gabby was waiting in line at the food court when I first laid eyes on her. Interestingly, I had initially intended to dine at a different restaurant, but the line there was too long, so I joined the line at the restaurant where Gabby was standing. When our eyes met, I was taken aback by how stunning she looked. Upon seeing me, Gabby chuckled and explained that she wasn't in line for food. She mentioned that her cousin worked at the restaurant, and she was simply waiting for her cousin to finish her shift. I was overjoyed that she spoke to me because I was struggling to come up with something to say. Thanks to her friendly approach, I managed to break the ice with humor, and we engaged in conversation while she awaited her cousin. It was clear that I was leaving a positive first impression on her. As she waited for her cousin, I offered to buy her some food, but Gabby expressed a preference for a strawberry lemonade instead. I purchased it for her, and our conversation continued, with me maintaining a playful and humorous demeanor. When her cousin eventually emerged, I took the opportunity to ask for Gabby's phone number, and she gladly shared it with me before they left. From that point on, I made every effort to sweep her off her feet. After going on several dates, attending events, and socializing with her and my friends, alongside her friends, we officially became a couple in 2017. Gabby and I tied the knot, and as time went by, we became parents to 3 wonderful kids. We have 2 daughters, and our son is in the middle. Over the years, we've grown into being excellent parents for our children. It hasn't been easy, but we made the choice to cut back on going out to clubs and concerts, though we still managed to find occasional moments of fun. Our nightlife definitely took a back seat. I've always felt fortunate to have Gabby as my wife. Her personality is fantastic, and her stunning looks even earned me compliments from my friends. Gabby is of Cuban descent, and her appearance is a mix between the actress who portrayed Wonder Woman and Salma Hayek. She has a curvaceous figure, arm tattoos, and is known for her signature ponytail, especially in her selfies. Financially, we're in a comfortable position. I work as a maintenance man, and Gabby, along with her sister, works as interior decorators, which brings in good income. Her sister is the interior designer, and Gabby joined the profession when she saw its success. I've been dedicated to my job for 7 years. Little did I expect that someone from my workplace would cause trouble in my marriage. The issue started last Wednesday. There's a guy in the shipping department, let's call him Daryl. While we're not close friends, I consider him an acquaintance, and we occasionally chat during lunch breaks. The most time I've spent with him was probably when we played dice in the parking lot at work. Our interactions mainly revolve around basketball discussions during lunch. One weekend, my car had brake issues preventing me from driving to work, so my wife graciously offered to drop me off and pick me up after my shift. The first time she came a bit early and had to wait around 30 minutes for me to finish. During that time, she struck up a conversation with Daryl, a coworker, and another colleague I'll call Brianna. After introducing her as my wife, we engaged in some casual chit-chat before heading home. Looking back, that moment might have been the starting point of it all. I suspect that Daryl may have started getting close to my wife during that week when she had to pick me up from work. Whenever I finished my shift, I'd often find my wife hanging out with Daryl and Brianna. They would be in the office enjoying some rap music through Daryl's Beats by Dre headphones connected to his phone. Gabby mentioned that she enjoyed talking to Brianna and would spend time in the office with her and Daryl. Since I knew that Brianna and Daryl lived close to each other and were good friends, I didn't initially feel uneasy about his presence around them. Following that week, Gabby started coming to my workplace to socialize with Daryl and Brianna. Given that Brianna was supposed to be my wife's friend, I didn't mind her visiting or chatting on the phone. However, I somewhat overlooked Daryl being consistently present and engaging in conversations with Gabby. My wife received a lot of attention, particularly on Instagram, so I tried to keep any concerns in check. Even when I saw her talking to Daryl without Brianna around, I didn't want to jump to conclusions and risk upsetting Gabby, leading to daily arguments in Spanish. It was last Wednesday when my concerns about my wife's potential infidelity began to surface. On that day, as I was leaving my workplace, I bid farewell to a colleague. He happened to be on the phone at the time and also said goodbye. What caught my attention was the way he mentioned my name, as if the person on the other end of the line knew me. So I inquired about who he was speaking to, and he responded with a smile, mentioning it was an old coworker of ours. He then asked me to wait for a moment, saying that this individual wanted to have a quick chat with me. He handed me the phone, and I was actually glad to reconnect with this guy. In my conversation with this former coworker, whom I'll refer to as Tyrell, we reminisced about our past work experiences and why he had left. He explained that his brother worked in a warehouse in Atlanta, and Tyrell had relocated there after his brother promised a job, playfully mentioning that he now earned more than us. After our catch-up, Tyrell expressed that he wanted to talk to me about something important and requested my phone number. I agreed, and he instructed me to send him my number via Facebook direct message DM. I complied and returned my friend's phone. Immediately after I sent him my number, Tyrell called me even before I had reached my car. I answered the call and asked him what was going on. He inquired if I was in my car, and I confirmed that I was. He then urged me not to start driving because he had something significant to share. This raised my curiosity, so I pressed him for more details. He replied, emphasizing that I couldn't disclose what he was about to tell me to anyone, and I agreed to keep it confidential. He inquired about whether Gabby still visited my workplace, and this took me by surprise. I replied affirmatively, and he further inquired about whether Daryl was still conversing with Gabby. Again, I confirmed this, and his persistent questioning made me uneasy. He assured me he didn't want to stir up trouble but believed Daryl had an interest in my wife. Since he no longer worked with us, he didn't care and felt it was important for me to be aware of this. Hearing this sent a shiver down my spine. I questioned him about how he knew this, and he disclosed that he had witnessed their interactions during his time working with us. Tyrell held a leadership position and moved between different departments. He mentioned that while walking around, he often observed Gabby and Daryl engaged in conversations. Additionally, he had informed our coworkers that he desired Gabby. He also made comments about her appearance. I probed further, asking Tyrell when he typically saw them together. He explained that it was usually about an hour before lunch. While he occasionally saw Gabby talking to Brianna, she conversed with Daryl more frequently. Tyrell indicated that it wasn't until she started visiting him on Saturdays, particularly when Daryl's department had to work overtime, that he suspected something might be happening. This revelation surprised me because I rarely worked overtime, making it unclear why she would be there. I inquired of Tyrell if he was certain about Gabby's Saturday visits, and he firmed his certainty. He mentioned he was quite convinced that Daryl might be getting closer to her. During one particular Saturday visit, given the limited activities on Saturdays, they had a surplus of free time, and Daryl frequently played his beats by Dre music speaker, even with Gabby present. This seemed typical to Tyrell. However, after some time, he returned with news that he had heard loud Spanish music playing. Upon closer inspection, Tyrell described the situation as becoming intimate between Gabby and the guys. According to him, Daryl had a hold of Gabby by her neck while she engaged in twerking for him. Although my wife didn't possess an extremely curvaceous figure, she had enough to engage in twerking if she chose. I was left in shock when Tyrell shared this with me. I sought confirmation by asking if he was absolutely certain, and he responded firmly, emphasizing that he was not visually impaired. He recounted that everyone watched as she danced provocatively for Daryl, even mentioning that he lifted her shirt to reveal her backside through her leggings. I then asked whether she attempted to halt Daryl's advances, to which he replied in the negative. According to Tyrell, all she did was laugh and continue dancing for him, almost as if she were trying to win a competition. I struggled to believe the information Tyrell was sharing. He expressed his regrets and advised me to keep my wife away from him, including Brianna. I thanked him for sharing all of this with me and concluded our conversation. Shortly thereafter, I felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated by the situation. As I drove back home, my mind was filled with tumultuous thoughts. What bothered me even more was that Gabby's twerking incident with Daryl had occurred about 7 or 8 months ago. Who knows what may have transpired since then? They might have taken their rendezvous to his place, and she could have done more than just dance. I realized that I needed to confront Gabby and see if she would be forthcoming with the truth. Upon arriving home, I found my wife engrossed in a phone conversation with her mom. After some casual chatter, I asked her if she had met with Brianna today, to which she responded affirmatively. I then inquired about whether she had seen Daryl, and she replied in the negative. I expressed my surprise, mentioning that they seemed inseparable, like the Three Musketeers. She claimed that Daryl wasn't around much, which I knew was a blatant falsehood. Following this exchange, my wife simply walked past me and into the kitchen to grab her phone, likely to text her friends. I couldn't believe that she had blatantly lied to me about her relationship with Daryl. Even I had observed how often he was around her, and I felt deeply hurt by what seemed increasingly evident. Subsequently, all I could do was watch her prepare dinner for our children, while feeling a sense of sadness and despair. My emotions were a volatile mix of anger and teary-eyed sorrow. At this point, I desperately needed concrete evidence that something was indeed happening. However, obtaining such proof would be extremely challenging, given that it involved people I worked with. I couldn't risk losing my job, and Tyrell's account of the twerking incident wouldn't suffice as grounds for divorce. Moreover, they could easily deny it ever occurred. My wife might argue that she was merely delivering lunch to Daryl, and the elderly security guard would likely corroborate her story. I had no choice but to assume that my wife had cheated on me. It was clear that she had secretly met up with Daryl and twerked for him 8 months ago. With so much time having passed, I couldn't fathom what might have transpired since then. I needed to figure out how to obtain substantial evidence that could be used in a divorce case, all while treading carefully to safeguard my job and anticipate potential backlash from her family. I will provide an update if I manage to devise a plan of action. Update: the situation keeps deteriorating, and I've been noticing more troubling signs. It's becoming increasingly likely that my coworker may have had an affair with my wife. To provide some context, my wife, whom I'll call Gabby, had to pick me up from work because my car needed new brakes. While waiting for me to finish work, Gabby struck up a friendship with a girl in the front office named Brianna and a coworker in the shipping department named Daryl. Whenever I left the floor, I would often see them chat and listen to rap music. Over time, my wife became close friends with them, even visiting my workplace on her days off to join them during their lunch breaks. However, a few weeks ago, I received a distressing call from an old coworker named Tyrell. He informed me that Daryl may have made advances toward my wife. According to Tyrell, he witnessed them engaged in private conversations that appeared flirtatious. These interactions would typically occur an hour before Daryl's lunch break, which raised suspicion. What's even more troubling is that when Tyrell and Daryl worked overtime on Saturdays, Gabby would visit him. Initially, he hesitated to reveal anything, but one Saturday he witnessed something that compelled him to share with me. After Tyrell had departed, he described entering the shipping dock and hearing Spanish music playing. As he peered inside, he observed my wife dancing and twerking for Daryl. Their interactions began playfully but gradually turned more sensual and aggressive. He recounted how Gabby allowed Daryl to grasp her by the neck and lift her shirt to reveal her backside. Although they had initially appeared to be engaging in playful banter, it became evident that their interactions had taken a more serious turn, particularly in the way they exchanged glances. My initial response was to make excuses for my wife, questioning whether he was certain it was her. He assured me of his certainty, pointing out that Gabby was of Cuban descent, had tattoos on her arms, and consistently wore her hair in a ponytail. Tyrell disclosed that after witnessing this, he decided to leave and head home. I struggled to come to terms with the shocking information he had shared. The revelation that my wife had been twerking for Daryl was distressing enough, but what made it even worse was that this incident had occurred approximately 8 or 9 months ago. Considering the passage of time, I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of her relationship with Daryl at present. While I appreciated Tyrell's honesty in sharing this information, I couldn't help but feel that it may have come too late. I wished he had spoken up at the time, but it appeared that his reluctance to snitch on Daryl had allowed the situation between Daryl and my wife to progress. Upon returning home, I initiated a conversation with Gabby regarding her friendship with Daryl. She claimed that she occasionally spoke to Daryl, but he wasn't usually around, and she primarily conversed with Brianna. I recognized this as a fabrication since I had witnessed their interactions on some occasions. Thanks to Tyrell's revelations, I began to see through the facade she was putting on. It became apparent that she was using her friendship with Brianna as a pretext to spend time with Daryl. Following my conversation with Tyrell and Gabby's dishonesty concerning her relationship with Daryl, I started to conduct some discreet investigations around the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't access her iPhone due to her secure passcode, and she seemed to be constantly engrossed in conversations with her mom and sister. Instead, I resorted to eavesdropping on her conversations, particularly those that occurred late at night. I noticed that she would often retreat to the back porch to engage in these conversations, prompting me to discreetly listen in. While I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, some phrases caught my attention, such as, "Stop, you're crazy," or mentions of having fun at a specific club in our suburban area. On one occasion, I overheard her saying she can't go over there. I strongly suspected that "there" referred to Daryl's house, but without the full context, I couldn't be entirely certain. When she returned inside, I questioned her about her phone conversation, and she claimed it was her sister, Brianna, or someone else. However, the giggling and secretive behavior left me unconvinced by her explanation. I must have been oblivious before Tyrell's call because afterward, I noticed several red flags. My wife now always has her phone with her, avoids talking to me, and claims to be busy. When I suggested being intimate, she found it funny and said it wouldn't be appropriate with our kids at home. When I questioned why that would stop us, Gabby dismissed me as crazy and told me to leave her alone. She also said she wasn't in the mood. These actions, both before and after Tyrell's call, have made me doubt my wife's fidelity, and I wonder how I ever considered this behavior normal. Last Saturday, I believe I caused her to miss an opportunity to be with Daryl, which angered her. After my work shift, Gabby called me while I was driving home. She mentioned her plans to go out again and told me to cook for the kids. I immediately assumed she wanted to meet Daryl, so I lied, saying I had errands to run before returning home. She claimed she was already getting ready to leave and asked her sister to watch the kids, even though I knew that wasn't possible. Despite Gabby trying to guilt me into making her stay home, I reminded her that I have the right to go out and do things, and I might not be back until later. Gabby responded with a dismissive, "whatever," and hung up on me. Later that night, she had an attitude, and when I spoke a few words, she exploded with anger, blaming me for ruining her evening. I told her I didn't care and that my errands were more important than her socializing. Gabby claimed I never mentioned running errands, and I countered by saying she never mentioned her plans to go out. After my shower, I noticed she was on the porch talking on her phone and looking irritated. I'm pretty sure she was discussing me. However, a couple of days ago, things took a turn for the worse. That night, after I finished work, Gabby prepared dinner. She entered the bedroom while I was browsing new Jordans on my phone and informed me that dinner was ready. When I arrived in the dining room, she was dressed up, getting ready to go out. I inquired about her plans, and she mentioned she was heading out with some friends, leaving me in charge of the kids. I asked her with whom she was going out, and Gabby simply replied, "Her friends, again." I expressed my concern that she couldn't just leave like that, and she accused me of trying to control her. With an attitude, she walked out the door. I was quite upset because I knew what this was all about. She was still upset about the Saturday when she couldn't see Daryl, and she had been visibly sad about it ever since. My wife didn't return until around 2:30 in the morning. Throughout the night, I sent her texts, and her only response was, "Please stop texting me," which frustrated me. When she finally arrived, I was playing our son's PlayStation, and as soon as I saw her, we began arguing. I questioned why she came home so late, and she simply stated that she was hanging out with her friends, a response I wasn't willing to accept. I pointed out that I was supposed to be in bed, but I stayed up waiting for her to come home. She claimed that I never complained when she came home late in the past, to which I responded that I was always with her. So that argument didn't hold water. She cursed at me and accused me of trying to control her, but I disagreed. After a while, our son came out to see what all the yelling was about, and when he asked what was wrong, Gabby said she wouldn't argue with me anymore and stormed into the bedroom. My son saw the video game running and asked if he could play it. I agreed, but told him it would be just for a little while before he needed to go back to sleep. Once he agreed, he started playing the game. While I wanted to continue arguing with Gabby, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking I was a controlling husband, especially when she was the one who came home late. I usually tried to stay calm, but my suspicions got the best of me. Coming in at 2 a.m. was disrespectful, especially considering how she had left after our argument. We went into our bedroom to continue discussing when she had left. As I entered the bedroom, I was about to argue, but I stopped mid-sentence when I saw something surprising. When I walked in, my wife was undressing, and it looked like she was wearing a black string as underwear. I suppose she thought I would still be with our son because she seemed surprised when I walked in. She just stood there in a piece of string, and I saw her differently. After briefly looking at me, she gave me a look that suggested we would just end up arguing if I asked her anything. She grabbed her pajamas from the bed and decided to change in the bathroom. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, and I have to admit it left me stunned. I decided I would sleep on the couch because it would be awkward after that. My brain couldn't process what I had witnessed. I had never seen my wife wear such revealing underwear before. It was almost like she was wearing a black string, to be fair. Gabby did own some provocative underwear, but she hadn't worn them in a long time. She liked wearing skimpy swimwear for vacation photos on Instagram, but what she had on was more like something you'd see on a website like WorldStar. At this point, I was convinced that my wife was acting incredibly suspicious and keeping secrets. After coming across some advice online, I saw that many suggested recording her saying or doing something incriminating. So I ordered a voice-activated recording device, VAD, and planned to place it in her car. I asked a friend if I could use his address for the delivery, and he agreed without asking any questions. I'll pick up the device when it arrives in the mail. The last thing I need is for her to see the package and start questioning me about it. I'm determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Thanks to Tyrell, many of my suspicions seem to be on point. I'll try to provide updates, but I should be able to do so as long as I can keep my emotions in check and act as normal as possible. Update: I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has supported me during this challenging time with my wife. Your assistance in my quest to discover if my wife has been unfaithful has been invaluable. These conversations have been essential, providing both strength and wisdom in my pursuit of the truth. I truly appreciate all the support. However, the advice I've received here has been somewhat divided on how to handle this situation. Some have suggested using evidence and proof against her, while others advise confronting the red flags head-on. I was trying to decide the best course of action, but today my wife made a decision that forced my hand. Yes, my wife broke her vows. During our vacations, she would wear revealing swimwear, but it was usually for Instagram photos to showcase herself. It's widely understood that this type of string underwear isn't something you wear casually. It's meant to be shown off to someone. Witnessing this left me stunned, and I simply walked out of the room without engaging in an argument. Thanks to Tyrell, my world is currently in turmoil, and the signs are unmistakable. Before Tyrell's input, I always tried not to be the jealous type. Gabby is undeniably beautiful and receives compliments regularly. She enjoys sharing pictures on Instagram and garners a lot of attention there. Many comments on her photos are inappropriate, and even older pictures still receive likes. It's challenging for a jealous person to be with a wife who has thousands of guys following her on social media. I was aware of this and tried to be understanding. However, this situation is different, and I may have been too passive. Because we're married, I believed that this situation needed to change, and it was time to gather evidence. After purchasing a voice-activated recording VAD device, I planned to obtain proof, and if it turned out to be real, I intended to seek a divorce. With the VAD device in hand, I rode with her to the supermarket, hoping to improve our relationship. I thought that if there were issues between us, we could address them, and she would stop seeing Daryl. I told Gabby that it was fine for her to go out with friends, but as a parent, she still had responsibilities to her family. She responded by asserting her independence as a grown woman and accused me of being controlling. She insisted on her right to spend time with her friends and not be confined to the house or work all the time. I mentioned to her that I understood her desire for fun, but her spontaneity was becoming excessive. She wouldn't disclose when or where she was going. Gabby acknowledged this and said she'd be more considerate of me and our family. Following that conversation, she did show more consideration for my feelings, and it felt like we could have a deeper discussion about our relationship. However, that changed when Daryl called. A couple of days ago, initially I wasn't sure how to handle this, but this afternoon, Gabby pushed me to take action. Earlier this week, she mentioned that all our kids wanted to watch a Pixar movie with their older cousins this Saturday. She said she would take them so they could all watch the movie together, which I thought was a great idea, as it meant quality time with the kids. When they left a few hours later, I received a call from my nephew. He mentioned that he heard we had a particular video game he wanted to play and asked if he could come over after the movie. I told him that if Gabby was planning to bring him back home after the movie, he could come over and play the game. He was excited and said he would ask Gabby when she came to pick them up after the movie. His statement confused me. I thought Gabby was supposed to watch the movie with them, but he told me Gabby had informed them that she was just going to drop them off. I had slept in a bit that morning, so I wondered if I had misunderstood. However, I distinctly remembered Gabby saying she would watch the movie with the kids, and now I realized it was a lie. It was then that I recalled it was a Saturday, and Terrell had mentioned that Gabby would spend overtime with Daryl on Saturdays. Considering the time, the guys would still be working if it was indeed a Saturday. When I tried to call my wife, she didn't answer the phone, which infuriated me. Following that, I called my workplace and asked the security department if the guys were still working. They confirmed that they were, and I hung up, deeply suspicious of whether Gabby was actually with Daryl. I got in my car and decided to drive to my workplace, knowing I could likely arrive before they left. During the drive, all I could mutter was, "Stupid BTH," and frustration for what she was putting me through. I didn't know what to think, but I was filled with anger. We had discussed this issue before, and I thought she had understood. This time, I was determined not to let it slide, especially since she had lied to me. If Daryl was avoiding my wife, I no longer cared. I drove into the parking lot and began searching for her car. I quickly spotted it, and I was already feeling angry. I entered the building and headed down to the shipping dock where Daryl was working. As I walked through the double doors, Daryl's crew jumped up, surprised to see me. They were wearing their jackets, which suggested they were about to leave, until they noticed me scanning the area. I couldn't spot Daryl or Gabby, so I figured they must be in the trucker's lounge room. As I was heading in that direction, one of the crew members tried to block me and told me I didn't belong in the building. I warned him to back off, making it clear I wasn't joking and would confront him if necessary. He tried to act tough, but he didn't budge, indicating he didn't want to fight. Without wasting any more time on him, I proceeded to the trucker's lounge, where they had to be. The trucker's lounge used to be a small area where truckers would wait for their trucks to be loaded. A few years ago, they implemented a new rule that required all truck drivers to remain in their trucks and wait until they received their paperwork. This rule was meant to prevent theft, although I couldn't fathom why anyone would want to steal the cargo they were shipping. The room was small, with only 2 vending machines that were no longer operational. I was sure I would find them there, and hearing Daryl's groaning confirmed my suspicions. Staying close to the wall, I peered inside and couldn't believe what I witnessed. Daryl was involved with my wife, and it was shocking. Not only did I see Daryl sitting on a couch with his shirt unbuttoned and his pants and underwear down, but he also had my wife's face in his lap. It resembled a scene from a dark story, as if he were a lord in the mountains, forcing a village woman to engage in explicit activities. He looked down at my wife while she knelt obediently performing a certain act. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, sensing that I might need it. I started recording, capturing at least 7 seconds of their actions. Gabby was clearly too preoccupied to notice, and Daryl was simply watching her. After obtaining some evidence, I confronted them, loudly, shouting, "Damn you, witch!" Daryl appeared surprised to see me, while Gabby gave me a highly annoyed look on her face. She looked up at me and asked, in an agitated manner, what I was doing there. I just shouted at her, "Damn you, witch! Is this how you treat me?" She replied, "Can you please just go away?" Mind you, she was still holding him in her hand. I retorted with anger, saying to forget both of them while she covered her face, exclaiming, "Oh my God." What surprised me was that she didn't appear embarrassed about being caught. She seemed more embarrassed by my behavior in front of Daryl. Following that, I unleashed a string of insults at her, but all she did was roll her eyes and implore me to leave them alone and just go away. It seemed like she just wanted me gone, and the fact that our marriage was over didn't matter to her. It felt as though she was saying, "Oh well," which infuriated me even more. After hurling countless insults at her, all she could muster were phrases like, "Please leave," and "I don't care." I yelled at her, questioning how she could do this to me after claiming she loved me. She shot back, I don't love you like that, okay? Hearing that nearly crushed me, and she repeated her demand for me to leave. I informed her that I wanted a divorce, and she responded in a frustrated tone with a simple, okay. After that, I exited the warehouse, got into my car, and drove home. Upon reaching home, I was consumed with anger. I punched the walls and yelled at the top of my lungs. I couldn't believe she would betray me like this. She had become a person I no longer recognized, and I was absolutely fed up with the nonsense she had put me through. As it stands, she still hasn't returned, and I have no idea where she is. I suspect she might be with her sister. Having to explain the situation, whatever comes next, I have irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. I intend to use it in various ways, especially during the divorce proceedings. It clearly demonstrates her irresponsibility and lack of concern for our marriage. It's unfortunate to admit, but I likely shouldn't have relied on Tyrell to inform me about this, as the signs were already present. She only valued the things I did for her, and that's the sole reason she married me. Gabby didn't seek love, she simply craved being wanted. Since Daryl was attractive to her and desired her, they became involved. Relationships like this one usually end in failure because women like her tend to revert to their true selves. I recently purchased a voice-activated recorder VAD, which I've only used once. It appeared that all I required was someone who no longer worked with us. Update: people here seem to believe that I was hesitant to confront my wife, but that's not the case. After discovering my wife's infidelity, I took significant steps to consult with a lawyer and initiate divorce proceedings. Gabby was the type of person who felt entitled. If she were to be married, I spared no expense to keep her content, and she led me to believe that's what a good husband should do. She acted as though I was fortunate because she was a trophy wife, especially considering the attention she received. I bought into it, particularly since she was a devoted mother and initially a good wife. She didn't love me, she only craved the attention and the comfortable life I had worked hard to provide. Another issue was that Gabby always sought attention. This was evident in her love for Snapchat and Instagram. She had a large number of followers, with 80% of them being men. Even worse were the comments on her posts. That's why I had to develop a thick skin when I was with her, especially when she posted bikini photos from our trips to places like Vegas and Jamaica. It was now clear that she wouldn't change. Despite finding someone willing to take care of her, it didn't matter when she encountered someone she found attractive. He treated her as she believed she should be treated. With everything coming to an end, I had to face the reality of the situation and decided to call my siblings to share everything with them. It was something I didn't want to do, but it was undoubtedly the right time. I called my older brother, who I'll call Ricky, and vented about what had happened, using a lot of strong language. After he asked if I was home, he mentioned he needed to run an errand but would swing by later. Next, I called my younger sister and shared the news with her too. She gave me a lecture but suspected Ricky would contact her about it. She said she'd check on me later and hung up. Later, she called back and told me Ricky was on his way to pick me up. She asked about the kids and I said they were at the movies with Gabby, responsible for picking them up. She wasn't thrilled about watching the kids, but given my emotional state, there wasn't much we could do. After hanging up, I started to doze off until I heard Ricky's car pull up. I opened the door and saw my imposing-looking brother approaching with a bag in his toolbox. Ricky had a tough appearance, having played football in high school and college. Now, with his shaved head and beard, he looked like a military veteran. He came over and gave me a heartfelt hug. Even though we typically played the tough guy role with our emotions, tears welled up because we both knew it was what I needed. After the hug, he mentioned that he had stopped at a store and bought new locks for the house. He thought it was crucial to secure the place so Gabby couldn't come in later and take everything. After an hour of talking and changing the locks, we went to Ricky's house. Ricky and his girlfriend were incredibly supportive and did their best to lift my spirits throughout the weekend. My sister Gina also came over to talk to me. After reaching out to the rest of my family, I couldn't help but replay the traumatic event in my mind. I hoped to catch my wife confessing or something similar, but the opportunity for confrontation arrived sooner than expected when she admitted she didn't love me in that way. A burning desire for revenge consumed me. I wanted payback for how she had deceived me. That day, the urge for vengeance was strong, and I wasn't finished dealing with this situation yet. On that Sunday, Gabby's sister actually gave me a call. Initially, my brother didn't want me to answer, but I had to remind him that my kids were over at Gabby's place. I stepped out of the room and answered the call. After picking up, her sister, who I'll call Christina, asked me what was happening. She mentioned that her sister wouldn't return to the house but didn't want to explain why. I told her the truth, that I had caught her sister cheating on me at my workplace. There were a few seconds of silence after that. Then she started denying it and claimed I was lying about her sister. After letting her vent, I told her to hang up, saying I would show her the evidence. She started saying something, but I hung up angrily. After that, I sent her the video and didn't hear from her for the rest of that day. Following that, I spent the remainder of the day trying to relax. When Monday came, I went to work and spoke with my supervisor about Daryl and Gabby. Surprisingly, he provided me with a testimony sheet to file my complaint. While I was completing the paperwork, he expressed his sympathy and asked if I was certain this was happening. Angrily, I confirmed and asked him if he wanted to see the video I had taken. He was surprised and inquired if I actually had evidence. I confirmed that I did. He took back the form I was filling out and said it wouldn't be necessary anymore. He picked up the phone and discussed the situation with someone. After hanging up, he mentioned that he had contacted the manager and asked them to send the video to his email as he would address it when the boss visited the facility in a couple of days. I agreed to this, but also informed him that I wouldn't be coming to work during those days, to which he was just about to suggest the same. A few days ago, Gabby's sister, Christina, called me back, which surprised me. She said she had talked to Gabby, and Christina wanted me to have a conversation with Gabby that night because the kids wanted to come home. I agreed to take my kids, but expressed my reluctance to talk to Gabby because, in my view, there was nothing left to discuss. She mentioned that she understood Gabby had made a mistake, but believed I should be the more reasonable one and consider the family. Somehow, I felt like I was the one being unreasonable. I informed her that I wasn't willing to talk to her because she had cheated with my coworker and caused embarrassment at my workplace. I pointed out to Christina that she had brought another guy into my house, and I was expected to act like none of that had occurred. She replied by saying that wasn't true, claiming that Gabby only had involvement with him at work or at his place. I laughed it off and remarked, "How can I be sure of that?" I mentioned that for all I knew, she might have been involved with Daryl's friends when she was around. Chris got upset and stated that wasn't how it happened. I asked her to clarify what did happen, and that's when she revealed everything Gabby had told her. I regretted bringing it up, especially because I knew Gabby wouldn't lie to Christina, which made it even worse. According to Christina, when Gabby first met Brianna, Daryl was already talking to Brianna, and Gabby informed them that she was there to pick me up. While waiting for me, they started talking and began hanging out whenever she came around. Chris said they became friends over time and enjoyed spending time together during lunch. She mentioned that Daryl began complimenting her, particularly on her appearance, which surprised her but made her feel good about the attention. One day, she slipped up and told Brianna that she found Daryl attractive, and Brianna informed him about it. Chris explained that after that, he started getting too close to her and making inappropriate comments. When she heard this, she played it off, but deep down, she liked him and often thought about it. I expressed my disbelief and asked her why she didn't tell me earlier, as I would have put a stop to it. She replied that she didn't want to because she really liked him and found his unpredictable behavior appealing. I inquired about when all of this started, and Christina hesitated to tell me at first. However, when I threatened to end the call, she had to reveal the details. She mentioned that she wasn't sure when it started, but Gabby had told her about a birthday party hosted by Brianna's sister. I was aware of Brianna's sister's tendency to get drunk at parties. Brianna had invited Gabby to the party, and she had attended. According to Christina, Daryl had also been present at the party. She mentioned that Gabby was taken by surprise when she saw him at the party, and they spent time together, having a good time. Christina asked if he was trying to pursue her, and Gabby confirmed that he was. She explained that they started dancing together, but things took a more aggressive turn over time. I inquired about what she meant by aggressive, and she said he asked her to twerk for him. Gabby turned around and began twerking on him. She mentioned that with the tight leggings she was wearing, it was evident that he was enjoying her twerking and grinding against him. After a while, he began kissing her, and they progressed to making out. Christina explained that they started going out together, and things began to escalate beyond what was acceptable. This raised more red flags for me. She went on to say that when Gabby went to hang out at Daryl's apartment with Brianna, he made advances on her, and she allowed it. Seeing this, Brianna left them alone in his apartment. Chris added that after making out, he performed BJ on her. Eventually, he repeatedly attempted to engage in BJ, and sometimes she allowed it, while other times she stopped him. It reached a point where she no longer resisted, and he convinced her to reciprocate. I asked Christina if these encounters happened when my kids were around, and she clarified that everything occurred at work and at his apartment. I expressed disbelief and told Christina that I couldn't believe she had done this to me. She replied that she couldn't believe it either, and mentioned that Gabby thought he was skilled and appreciated his wild nature. Christina explained that Gabby initially thought that going down on her would be the extent of it, but he desired more. She recalled a day when he turned her around and pinned her against the couch. She admitted that in hindsight, it was clear that the day had come when he had his way with her. Christina told her that she should have gotten up and left, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, allowing him to take her from behind. I shook my head in disbelief and had to ask once more how in the world could she do this to me. She explained that Gabby had found it all very exciting, and the fact that it was wrong added to the thrill. Christina mentioned that she had always been attracted to his rebellious nature, and when he finally won her over, he didn't disappoint. She noted that he was so eager that she was worried the neighbors might hear them. I could relate to what she was saying because when I was younger, my brother and I had to help my aunt move out of one of her apartments. While we were moving things, we suddenly heard loud noises. Later on, we realized that someone in the apartment below us was watching an action movie or something, and it sounded like Vin Diesel or James Bond was living right beneath us. The walls were incredibly thin, to say the least. If Daryl's apartment was as budget-friendly and poorly constructed as my aunt's, then it's highly likely that the neighbors could hear Daryl and Gabby, especially if they were being intimate from behind. She explained that after that initial encounter, whenever he wanted it, he got it. It was meant to be their little secret until Tyrell spilled the beans, showing that he had more courage than they had assumed. Christina started to say more, but I told her that the details about the party and the apartment situation were already overwhelming. She asked if I could at least be the calm and rational one again and have a conversation with Gabby, but I firmly declined. I explained that I would be coming over tomorrow to pick up the kids, but I had no intentions of having a conversation with Gabby. She suggested that it wouldn't work if both of us were stubborn, but I reiterated that she had made a fool out of me, and I had no intention of giving her another chance. I informed her of my plans to pick up the kids, and she expressed frustration, letting out a groan before hanging up. On that day, I felt really down, and I had to work my way back up from that low point. A few hours later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. They followed up with a text, and I realized it was a coworker I knew, which surprised me. I was driving at the time, so I connected the call through my Bluetooth dashboard. He inquired about what was going on, and I simply mentioned that I was running errands. He then asked me if I had anything to do with Daryl getting fired, which caught me off guard. According to him, there were 2 men and a woman in suits who came to our workplace with our supervisor. They went straight to the area where the trucker lounge was located. Hearing this, I suspected that they were checking the lounge to see if it matched the room in the video. Later, he mentioned that about 20 minutes after their arrival, they called Daryl to the office and asked him to gather his belongings. I confessed the truth to my coworker, and he said he would have done the same thing. He also asked when I would be returning to work, and I informed him that I planned to come in on Friday and work a half day. He responded positively and said he'd catch up with me later. I felt relieved and made dinner for myself that night. Now, my main focus was on the divorce proceedings. The following day was the day I had to pick up my kids, and I wasn't particularly looking forward to it. It had been several days since I had seen Gabby, and my brother Ricky joined me just in case. When I arrived, my kids were genuinely excited to see me. They told me that their mother had been unkind to them and had been ignoring them, so they wanted to come home. Glancing over, I saw Gabby in the kitchen on her cell phone, ignoring me and chatting with her sister. I told the kids to go ahead and get in my car, and my oldest daughter asked if she could bring her iPad with her. I agreed, but Gabby suddenly objected, saying that she had to leave it with her because she had bought it. My daughter was becoming emotionally upset, so I instructed her to wait in the car. When she walked away, I expressed my disbelief that she would act so petty. This led to a heated argument, and I didn't hold back this time. I called her derogatory names, and she retorted by labeling me a snitch for getting Daryl fired from her job. I pointed out that she had previously claimed not to know Daryl that well, and she responded with profanity, telling me to go cry to my mama. She also remarked that I was fortunate she even paid attention to me. She suggested that Daryl and I could have settled things with a fight instead of getting him fired. I retorted that I only fight for real women, not thots who don't deserve that privilege. She insulted me, calling me dusty and lame, and declared that she doesn't love a lame guy. Frustrated, I grabbed a glass of orange juice and threw it at her, narrowly missing her. In shock, she retaliated by throwing a fork at my head, which thankfully missed as well. All of this chaos was eventually stopped by my brother, Christina, and Christina's friend, who were present. Gabby continued yelling that she didn't want me and kept saying, "Next, next." My brother practically dragged me to the porch to calm down, and once I had cooled off, I left because I had expended all my energy and couldn't fight my brother to get back inside. When I returned to the car, I informed my daughter that her mother had taken the iPad. She responded by saying she didn't care anymore, she just wanted to leave. I couldn't believe the ordeal I had just gone through, and while I acknowledged that I had crossed a line, it still felt good to let out my frustrations on her. Right now, my kids are with me, and with the new locks on the door, they will remain with me. I had to gently break the news to the kids that their mother and I wouldn't be living together anymore, which crushed them, though they understood. As I mentioned before, my main focus now was on the divorce papers and the lawyers I spoke to said the video could be helpful in various arguments. I firmly believe my wife is overly self-assured, and I hope her actions were worth it. If she thinks she can have a meaningful relationship with Daryl, she's deluding herself. Daryl, or anyone else for that matter, is unlikely to commit to her. She's approaching 40 and has many kids, and he's not looking to become a stepdad overnight. If that's her expectation, I know Daryl better than she does. Gabby was merely a conquest for him, and once he's done, he'll move on to someone else. I'm certain that reality will sink in soon, and it probably won't take even a year. At least now, I can have some peace of mind, but I still worry about my kids and my immediate family. Perhaps even Christina, if she ever realizes how foolish Gabby's actions were.
Story 3.
I caught my wife in bed with her student and destroyed both of their professional lives. Hello everyone, I'm Jake, 37 male, and I was married to my ex-wife Leah, 30 female, for 3+ years. We were two love peas in a pod, and I would never imagine she would destroy all we had by cheating on me. Even as I write this story, my heart is really heavy, and I hope writing this will help me feel better in some way. Leah and I met some years ago at a street festival in our town, and for some reason I kept bumping into her despite the number of people on the street that day. The last time I bumped into her, we had to stop and laugh because we had obviously seen each other at least 6 times that day. I firmly believe in the universe aligning things for me, so I assumed the universe was trying to send me a message with the average height, green-eyed, blonde lady I kept bumping into. I was forced to talk to her. Our conversation was smooth, and everything about her seemed perfect. Also, she sounded very intelligent, and during our conversation, I realized she had recently begun her career as a professor in physics at our state college. That was a big one, mainly because she did not look like it, and if one was not careful, one would think she had just graduated from college because of her body stature and how young she looked facially. Initially, I didn't think Leah and I would end up dating each other. I mostly thought of her as an intelligent friend that sometimes intimidated me with her intelligence. But as we hung out more and got to know each other better, I fell for her. Likewise, she loved my company too and fell in love with me. About 2 months after we met, she started to share a bed with me. She would occasionally come to my house for some advice whenever she was having issues with her then boyfriend. As time passed, we became intimate. I know we shouldn't have, but I did that because she told me she was on the edge of breaking up with her boyfriend, and a few weeks after our intimacy started, she broke up with him. She said he did not match up with her intellectually, and his personality was totally different from hers. Although her excuse for breaking up with her boyfriend didn't sit well with me, I was glad we were together. I didn't know I was setting myself up in a trap. Eventually, we ended up dating for 9 months, and we married. I was madly in love with her, and I believed she would be the woman that would heal me with her love, and hopefully, we would grow old together. Before Leah and I married, we agreed to have children early because I love kids and didn't want to wait until 40 to be a dad. I wanted to spend enough time with my kids, grow with them, and shower them with the fatherly love I never had. Our plan was perfect initially, but about a year after we married, Leah could not conceive. This became even more heartbreaking for me in the second year of our marriage because we tried everything possible and ran a series of tests to find out why she couldn't conceive, but everything was fine. Without her knowledge, I would even do some tests to be sure that I wasn't the problem, and each time the results came out fine. Unlike Leah, I was worried because I expected we would at least have a child in the second year of our marriage, but that didn't happen, and to be honest, it made me sad. I know it's usually a woman's thing to be obsessed with kids, but in our situation, Leah didn't seem bothered about it. Her usual phrase was, "Don't worry, we will have a child when the time is right," and she would carry on with whatever she was doing. At one point, I had to stop mentioning it because she made me feel like I was overdoing it or blaming her for our inability to have kids. So I stopped. I know this information is very sensitive and I'm not supposed to share it here, but it is crucial for me that I do, and at the end of my story, you will understand why. Despite not having a child, I didn't allow that to weigh down our marriage. I took it as an opportunity to bond more with Leah and enjoy her company before the children came. But as time passed, I noticed Leah began to change. A couple of months later, we were like strangers living under the same roof. For example, I worked as a construction worker, and even without meeting most of my colleagues and clients, Leah knew their names, how they looked, their behaviors and attitudes. This was because we had the habit of telling each other details of our day at work. Also, I knew the names of the students who took her course, how they looked, and everything else. Without meeting them, I knew the students that were giving her a tough time, and the cool ones. This was possible because Leah used to talk a lot about her students and her day at work in general. You're wondering how things changed? I'll tell you. Our whole daily conversation just stopped. I could not explain why everything changed. Initially, when it started, I instantly thought she was having a bad day, but her bad day turned into bad weeks, and the weeks rolled into months. We could go weeks without bonding like we used to, and if I tried to start a conversation, she would either say that she was busy at the moment, or we would talk later, which never happened. As if that wasn't enough, our intimacy was reduced. It got to the point I started begging to touch her, but no matter how much I tried, she would never agree. Instead, she would get offended and walk out of the bedroom. Whenever she did, it was a slap on my ego, and it would break my heart at the same time. I thought she was denying me my husband's rights, and she was trying to avoid us having a child, but because I loved her so much, I was patient and tried not to make a big deal out of it. As funny as it sounds, I believed she would realize she was pushing me away and would try to make things right, but that never happened. Instead, she grew more distant, and we almost became beefing roommates because our communication dropped terribly. At this point, you might be thinking I should have done some investigation to find out why she suddenly changed, but I didn't. I was blinded by love and wanted things to work out between us. I made a compromising decision to show how desperate I was to make things work out because I thought it would change things between us. I had a conversation with Leah, and I told her it didn't matter if we had a child or not, and if she wanted, we could spend the rest of our lives without a child, which seemed to cheer her up. For the whole week, she changed a bit, and her intimacy returned, even though it felt as if I was forcing myself on her. It was better than nothing. Exactly a week later, she returned to her cold, distant self. It was almost as if she was faking the new change for only a week, and as soon as she was done, she took off the happy, changed Leah mask. This was very frustrating for me. It affected me at work and affected my ability to sleep. When I hear how couples say they can go a whole week without connecting or talking to each other while living in the same house, I wonder how they do it because in my situation, it was taking its mental toll on me. On the other hand, Leah didn't care. She would return from work in a great mood, make dinner or lunch for herself, focus on her books and laptop for the rest of the evening, and whenever she was tired, she would go to bed. The following day, she would repeat the same cycle and leave me to wallow in my loneliness. Towards our 3rd anniversary, I decided to make things right by celebrating her the whole week, buying her something nice and taking her to a new fancy restaurant that had recently opened in our town. I had already made preparations and reserved a table for us. Even after reminding her with text messages the whole day, she didn't show up. She didn't even return home that night. She claimed she slept off at her fellow professor's house while in the middle of a project they were working on, and that was the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. I had enough already. I was emotionally drained, mentally sick, and tired of everything happening already. I had been battling with the thought of Leah cheating on me, but I chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. I guess I refused to admit there was a possibility of her cheating on me because of how broken and devastated I would be to find out that the woman I loved and adored was having an affair with someone else. So, after everything that happened on the week of our anniversary, I did some digging. I found one of those private investigators online and hired him to see if Leah was up to something behind my back. While the private investigator followed Leah around, I tried to do some digging on my own. On the nights I knew she was utterly exhausted and deeply asleep, I'd use her fingerprint to unlock her phone and go through it. I had seen many stories of wives cheating on their husbands and how they found out by going through their wives' phones, so I searched for dating apps, checked her emails, both her personal and work email. I checked her social media, searched for contacts saved with suspicious names and emojis, and after minutes of searching, I could not find anything. The next day, when she woke up, I asked if I could borrow her laptop to do something, and she gave it to me with glee. I used the opportunity to go through her laptop, hoping to discover a hidden app or social media account, but she was as clean as a weasel. There was no trace or evidence that she was cheating on me, and I even began to feel bad for hiring a private investigator to invade her privacy. Since it was a weekend, I wanted to call the private investigator to back off and explain to him that I was only being paranoid, but I decided to wait until Monday since Leah was mainly home on the weekends. Eventually, Monday came and I called the private investigator to back off, but he said he had gathered a few things he would love me to see before I could tell him to stop. To even think that this was only a week after I hired him. Honestly, folks, I almost had a heart attack before I met up with the investigator. That was the longest drive of my life, and throughout the 15-minute drive, all thoughts crossed my mind. Ultimately, I met with the private investigator, and what I feared the most happened. Leah was seeing someone, and looking at the pictures of them walking hand in hand as they went to different places broke my heart. I'll admit, I cried. I had always been emotionally soft and couldn't believe Leah was cheating on me. They even went to the new restaurant I booked us a table at, but she didn't show up. There were also pictures of them making out in Leah's car, going into a hotel together, and hanging out late at night. Well, it turned out the project Leah was working on was the man in her arms. The most heartbreaking part was he was younger and was definitely in his early 22nd. My investigator gathered that her lover was a final-year physics student named Ryan, and Leah was his professor. The moment my private investigator mentioned his name, it rang a bell, and my heart sank. In the past, Leah had mentioned Ryan to me many times, and she praised him a lot because he was super intelligent and never gave her a tough time. He was also one of her best students, and I knew she talked about him regularly because she loved intelligent people, but I never imagined she would stoop so low and cheat on me with her student. I was so heartbroken and angered at the same time. In the past 3 years plus, I sacrificed a lot for Leah and ensured life was comfortable for her. I did most of the cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping because she always complained about tiredness. The only thing Leah did was the laundry, and she took care of that on weekends while I handled the rest. The splitting of bills was 70 to 30. I took the more significant share because I believed it was my responsibility as a man to cover most of the bills. I wanted to help so she could save some money. I thought it was normal to try and help out the one you love, and that was precisely what I did. The worst was my mother not supporting my relationship and marriage with Leah, but I married her, which shook our relationship. After recapping the past and returning to my reality, I got my crap together and asked my private investigator to keep following Leah. I was unsatisfied with the picture evidence and wanted something more epic. I wanted to catch them in the act. When I got home that day, I didn't say a word or confront her, despite how angered I was and how tempting it was. I wanted to leave the house. I feared I would harm her in her sleep, so I packed a couple of clothes from the closet, and in the process of doing so, I found something that destroyed whatever love was left in my heart for Leah. I found birth control pills, packs of birth control pills carefully tucked under the pile of folded clothes. It didn't make sense to me initially, because Leah could not conceive. We tried for 2 years and nothing happened, so she had no reason to take birth control pills unless she was trying to prevent getting pregnant. Almost immediately, it dawned on me that she had been taking birth control pills the whole time. She was the reason she could not conceive, yet she allowed me to worry and think something was wrong with us. I held the birth control pills and cried bitterly. Finding out she was on birth control pills hurt me more than knowing she cheated on me with a younger guy. Well, I left the house and told her I would visit my mother and would return that weekend. I wasn't. It was bait, and I hoped she would take it. I had to lodge at a hotel that night to clear my head. The following day, my PI notified me that he had been following Leah the whole afternoon, and it seemed like she and her affair partner were heading to my house. This was precisely what I wanted. I had seen videos of men bursting in on their cheating wives, and I was ready to go all out for her. I spiced things up by hiring a videographer and paid him to follow me. Shortly after Leah and Ryan arrived at my house, I arrived too, but I waited for them to settle. About 15 minutes later, I went into the house with my videographer. She never locks the front door, and I could bet on that, especially when she knew I wasn't coming home until the weekend. We crept to the room, and no one heard us because soft music played in the living room. My stomach churned as I walked to our bedroom door, and without wasting time, I kicked the door open and made the videographer record Ryan standing behind Leah as they did it. The next minute they were scurrying for their clothes like rats, and as soon as she wrapped her head around what was going on, she started screaming and yelling at me. I was so angry that I pulled her by the arm and threw her out of the house naked. Her affair partner managed to wear his pants and he ran out before I could return to him. It was a terrible scene. She yelled and banged on my door, and the neighbors were forced to come out and see what it was. When she realized what she had done, she ran into her car and drove off with Ryan. Long story short, that same day, which was 2 weeks ago, I forwarded all the pictures my PI gathered and the video from the videographer to the college she worked at. I got the idea from one of the stories I read here. I knew how it would end, and things turned out as expected. The following week she was fired, and her dear lover was expelled in his final year. Now the thing is, I thought all the pain and anger would go away after I ruined their careers, but nothing has changed. I even feel more terrible now because Leah had been blowing up my phone and promised to make my life miserable since I ruined hers. I'm so confused right now. Wow, Alp, this is definitely a blow to the ego that you didn't need. At first, it seemed like her attitude towards you was due to her own thoughts and feelings of not being able to start a family with you, as if she was battling her own inner demons. Turns out she was exercising a demon, all right, in the bedroom. I'm so sorry she lied to you like that for so long and made you worry at some point that you were unable to have children. That's so cruel to do to someone you claim to love. Moreover, I wonder how she was able to hide all this on her electronics. At the same time, you did start the relationship in shady circumstances. You knew she was still with her then boyfriend at the time, and yet you still pursued each other. I'm not saying you were asking for this, but it definitely didn't start off with the best intentions. Hey everyone, thank you for your comments. Most of you are saying our marriage was rushed and I should have known her longer than that. To be honest, I didn't think our marriage was rushed. I was in love and didn't see anything wrong with getting married after 9 months of dating. I even know couples who dated for only 4 months and have been married for more than 20 years now. Anyways, I accept my mistake, and if I ever love again, I'll make sure to date long enough. You guys are also right. Leah breaking up with her ex-boyfriend to be with me was a red flag, and I should have known she would do the same with me once she saw someone new. It's just that I never expected things to turn out like this. Meanwhile, I met with Leah 2 days ago and gave her the divorce papers. She was stunned that I wanted to divorce her, and instead of signing it, she laughed. She said she was doing me a favor by marrying me, and from the onset, I was too dumb for her. I swear that hurt, but I covered it up with a smile. Until 2 days ago, and the day I caught her red-handed, I had never seen her for the beast she was. Right now, it feels like a veil has been taken off my eyes, and I prefer to have this heartbreak now than to end up raising another man's child, only to realize in the future that she was cheating on me the whole time. The part that really messed with my head was that she showed no remorse. Instead, she kept talking about how I was lucky to be with her and how I wouldn't last a month without running to beg her to take me back. She wishes. She didn't sign the divorce papers, she took them instead. She said she was giving me time to get over my hurt feelings and think about the mistake I was about to make. The audacity. If only she knew that there can never be us again. She still doesn't know I found the birth control pills, and I haven't mentioned anything. I thought she would bring up her being sacked due to breaking the rules, but she didn't. She focused more on me coming back to her. Meanwhile, I will update you all again as soon as she signs the divorce papers. She was only saying that to hurt you because she's angry at herself for getting caught. She had to say that to try to scare you into coming back because, in reality, she has and is nothing without you. She can't cook or clean for herself. Update 2. Hey guys, your comments have helped me and I cannot appreciate you all enough. It is true, Leah was trying to manipulate me. She knew I was a weak spot and she wanted to exploit that. I did as you advised and she signed the divorce papers. I'm happy to announce that we are officially divorced and she is out of my life for good. My apologies for not making this update earlier. After we divorced, I wanted some quiet time, so I went off social media for a few weeks. I would not have believed it if someone had told me that Leah would break in a matter of weeks. The other time we met for her to sign the divorce papers, she acted tough and like she was the only existing woman on earth. But after we divorced, she turned into a new person. She kept blowing up my phone and sent me multiple messages on Facebook. I was even forced to block her number and block her on social media, but that didn't stop her. Some days ago, she showed up at my front door looking all miserable and in tears. Funnily enough, some people commented that she would return, but I didn't believe them. Immediately I opened the door, she went on her knees and started to cry. She begged me to take her back. If I did, she would turn a new leaf. She went on to talk about how life had been hard for her without me in it, and as of the time she spoke, she had nowhere to stay, and her car was about to get repossessed if I didn't help her. She had lost her job, and due to her tarnished reputation, she wasn't getting any other work. She had wasted all her savings on her student boyfriend, treating him in the best restaurant and gifting him the fanciest clothes. Now she's broke. Seeing her there enraged me again, and I tried to shut the door in her face, but she pushed forward. When her first pleas did not work, she pulled a different card and said she had a confession to make. She exhaled deeply and explained that she could not get pregnant for the 2 years we tried because she was on birth control pills. She said she took them because she was not ready to become a mother back then, but now she was ready, and if I took her back, she would get pregnant, and in a few months, we would have the child I've always wanted. And we'd be a big happy family. I allowed her to explain herself, and after she was done, I told her I knew about the birth control pills. The expression on her face was worth framing. Before she said another word, I told her that even if I could forgive her for cheating on me, I could never forgive her for making a fool out of me. She watched me as I worried for her and myself. I even prayed every night for us because I had run out of options, and prayer was the only thing left. I did many tests, yet she didn't say a word. She kept repeating her dumb phrase, and I believed we were on the same page. It's partially my fault. I should have suspected she knew something when she was acting less concerned, but I felt I was being paranoid. There's no need to ask if I took her back. I wouldn't be so stupid. I asked her to get off my property and promised to have her arrested if she showed up again. I guess it's just me now. I have never been heartbroken in the past, but I've never been so let down and devastated. Any suggestions on how to move on faster would be appreciated. Thank you everyone for all the comments and advice. It has really helped me. Yes, of course, life is hard without you. Who's going to clean up after her? She has to do that herself now. She sure did have some guts to ask you to take her back and to start a family. What an absolute train wreck and delusional buffoon to think that you'd actually take her back. That's a blessing you didn't end up having a child with her. You'd be trying to fight for custody of a child that might not even be yours. And who needs that kind of stress? There's a woman out there for you, OP, and you'll have the beautiful family you've always wanted. There's still time. Don't feel like you have to follow those societal pressures. Everyone's timeline looks different. All the best, OPE. What do you make of this? Would you have figured something was up? Do you have a similar story? Let us know in the comments below. Next up, an ex-husband has to find his way out of this doghouse. Ex texts me first, then says it's weird. Recap. Ex-husband cheats on me in November, divorced in February. He marries his affair partner in June, who is pregnant. Over the last few weeks, he'll start texting me out of the blue, talking to me about our son and his life. He's mentioned several times how financially he isn't doing so well and has lots of kids. Me and him have a son, she has 2 kids, and now 1 on the way. Until Wednesday this week, we basically spoke every day, mostly when he's supposed to be at work. He doesn't text me when he's home. His wife hates it when we talk about anything together. I asked him why he's having a kid so soon, and this MF said to get the kid's stuff out of the way so I'm not too old when the last kid is out of the house. He's 25. It's mostly because she's almost in her mid-30 seconds. He kept texting me about financial problems, but he claims he's happy. Says his wife takes care of him. Nothing else about what he likes about her or what he does for her, just what she can do for him. On Wednesday, he texts me saying that us talking is weird and that we shouldn't ever be friends. We weren't in the first place. Says it's unhealthy for us both, and he loves his wife, and that won't change. Like he's insinuating that I'll go after him. What the f***? I'm just confused because he was the one that kept engaging in conversation with me. Maybe he's just dealing with his own insecurities and placing it on me. I don't want him back, and I certainly don't go after married men. Why would he do that? Maybe his new wife caught him still cheating with UOP, and now he's in the doghouse. If she takes care of him, maybe she threatened to cut him off. It all probably is healthier to distance yourself from him though, OP. Update, I had a doctor's appointment set for my son for the last 2 months. I had so much going on, I didn't remember the exact day, and I got a notification that it's tomorrow. Well, I texted my ex about getting his affair partner set up to take him to appointments. I just started a job. I'm not in a position to miss work. She watches him during the day for me and my ex. He tells me to talk to her about that, and then I told her about the appointment. She texts me that she can't, even though she's literally home all day with the kids. He texts me, chewing me out on how I should have asked her instead of told. I only did what he said to do. He says that she's not my nanny and that I don't need to boss her around, and then says because of the text from last week that from now on, if I need to talk to him, it needs to be through her. Did I make him uncomfortable and he doesn't want to talk to me anymore? I don't know if she has his balls in a vice or what. He blows up on me because I just spoke to her about my son's appointment. I'm tired of dealing with them. The community actually had a response. It says, make alternative arrangements for childcare on your days and mandate the use of a CO parenting app in your custody arrangement. It'll free you from all of this crap. Oh, she's definitely in control of those balls of his. He 100% got in trouble for talking to you and threatened to take everything away. She's threatened by you, and that's okay. He really shouldn't be talking to you more than he should. Thoughts? Should they still be communicating outside of what is necessary? Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.
Story 4.
Flo, or Florence, was my spouse. I'm Jim. We met in college and tied the knot shortly after graduating. Our life together followed the usual path of husband and wife, with kids, a home, and a mortgage. Flo stayed home to care for our children until they grew up. Then she went back to her career in real estate. Flo's an attractive woman, and I reckon she faces some teasing at work from time to time. But as far as I know, she's stayed loyal to me and our marriage. She's got a bit of a naughty sense of humor sometimes, which I reckon might have caused some trouble in our marriage. We had 2 kids, a boy named Eric and a girl named Patty. When this all went down, Eric was 21 and had finished vocational school. He had his own place nearby and worked as an electrician. Patty was 19 and studying at a state university about 150 miles away. With the kids out of the picture, we looked ahead to a happy retirement, hoping for some travel and hopefully grandchildren to spoil. Our bed life was what I'd consider normal. We had a loving relationship that grew over our years together. Initially, we were physical engaged almost every night and on weekends. But over time, it tapered to a couple times a week, which was fine by me, but seemed to diminish Flo's interest too. Over time, I've mastered pushing all the right buttons to bring Flo to her peak. Yet nearly every scenario comes with a snag. Ours arrived in the form of a new neighbor. About 5 years back, Roger and his wife Alice moved in next door, and we struck up a friendship. The issue with Roger was his love for pranks. He'd pull them on anyone he could. Much to my dismay, I often found myself on the receiving end. What bothered me even more was Flo's enjoyment of his antics, especially when they targeted me. I tried explaining my discomfort to her, even joining in at times, but she didn't listen or back down. With time, I noticed Roger's interest in Flo, suspecting he harbored desires beyond mere friendship. Whenever we were together, he and Flo shared laughs over his sometimes crude jokes, leaving Alice and me to politely smile at their antics in public. I could tell Alice felt as disheartened as I did about their behavior. I vividly recall one day at the beach when Roger mocked some boaters passing by, and to my dismay, Flo joined in. Alice and I were stunned by their recklessness, but our reprimands fell on deaf ears as they laughed uproariously together. Right before the conclusion, I started sensing things spiraling out of hand. We were over at Roger and Alice's place, with Alice and I chilling in the backyard while Flo went inside with Roger to help grab drinks. We chatted for a bit until we realized they'd been gone for a while. Concerned, we headed indoors to find them. In the kitchen, we found no one, but as we began searching, they strolled out of the living room, arms wrapped around each other, giggling away. Roger sported lipstick smudges on his collar and around his mouth, while Flo's lipstick was askew and her hair tousled. Alice and I stood there, mouths agape, utterly taken aback. "Hey, guys. Sorry for the delay on drinks. Got caught up showing Flo my artwork," Roger said, seemingly oblivious to their appearance. Alice and I remained rooted in shock, stunned by their brazen display. "Roger's got some amazing prints. You know what I mean, right, Alice?" Flo chimed in with a smirk. At that point, I'd gathered my thoughts and finally spoke up. "What's happening here?" I directed at Flo. "Why does Roger have lipstick all over him and you look like you've been kissed?" "Oh, that's because I got really into admiring Roger's engravings. I guess I got carried away. You're not mad, are you?" she asked, trying to maintain a composed demeanor. As I studied their expressions, it dawned on me. Roger had that smirk he gets when he's about to pull one of his jokes, and Flo was avoiding my gaze, struggling not to burst into laughter. My irritation flared. Alice, still unaware, chimed in at last. "What's happening, Roger? If you think you can carry on with another woman in our home, you better think again." As Roger and Flo erupted into laughter, I think Alice caught on and smiled sheepishly, but I couldn't contain my anger. "One of these days you two will push it too far, and it won't end well." "Oh, lighten up, darling. It's just a prank. If you could see how you both looked, you'd find it funny too," Flo said between laughs. "Come on, guys. Let me fix you a drink and we can all laugh this off," Roger chimed in, strolling into the kitchen, with Flo trailing behind, still giggling. Alice and I simply shrugged and trailed after them, shaking our heads in disgust. "One day, Alice, they're going to push it too far," I reiterated. "One of these days, their pranks will backfire and someone will get hurt." Alice nodded in agreement. That night, when we returned home, I could tell Flo sensed my lingering anger, especially regarding her role in the prank. "I'm really sorry, honey," she said. "I just got carried away. Nothing serious happened. I just smeared some lipstick on him and messed up his hair. We never expected you guys to be upset. We were about to call it off when you and Alice finally showed up. Are you still mad? It was just a joke." "I'm trying not to be, Flo, but you have to stop getting involved in Roger's pranks. I nearly had a heart attack seeing you look like you were kissing him. You know how important loyalty is to me." "I understand, honey. I value loyalty just as much and would never do anything to hurt you. Just please remember that, okay? Give me a passionate kiss and forgive me," she pleaded. A couple of weeks later, we were back at Roger and Alice's for dinner on Saturday night. Just as we finished eating, a call came in that Roger mistakenly thought was for Alice. Alice worked as an ER nurse at a local hospital. After he hung up, he turned to Alice. "It's the ER. There's been a bad car wreck and they need you there ASAP. Ah, damn. Let me change and head out." 10 minutes later, Alice was on her way to the hospital. Once she'd left, Roger turned to me and asked if I could lend a hand with a project in his basement. While I helped, Flo remained silent, avoiding eye contact. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but later it struck me. "What do you need?" I asked, getting up to join him downstairs. "I need you to hold something for me while I fix it to the ceiling. It's not too heavy, but I can't hold it up and attach it at the same time, and Alice is too short for this." "Sure, sounds straightforward." Trust me, it is. It'll only take a minute. As we descended the stairs, he directed me to a metal support post near the stove on the floor above. He took a small metal box with a power cord hanging from it off his workbench and hoisted it up to the ceiling between the support post and the furnace. I noticed Flo had followed us down and was watching with a smile. Again, I didn't think much of her presence or her odd grin. "Now, I need you to hold this while I attach it," Roger instructed. "What's this for?" I questioned, lifting my hands to grasp the box. With Roger between the pipe and the furnace, I had to wrap my hands around the pipe to press the box against the basement ceiling. "I'll explain in a sec, but let me grab my tools first." He vanished behind his desk, leaving me holding the box. He returned moments later, and I didn't see what he had until I felt 2 quick clicks as something hard and metallic closed around my wrists. Suddenly, I realized I'd been tricked. I was handcuffed to the pipe. Shocked, I turned to see Roger putting his arm around Flo's waist. As they looked at me, my mind raced, but I managed to demand, "What's going on, Roger? Get these damn cuffs off!" "Sorry, buddy, can't do that. Flo's so fond of my prints, she wants another look. But this time, we don't need you or Alice around," he explained, as he and Flo ascended the basement steps. Flo exaggeratedly swayed her hips as they left. "Let me loose. This is going too far, Roger. You'll regret it if you don't release me right now." "Relax, dear. I just want to admire some engravings," Flo chuckled as they disappeared, leaving me struggling with the handcuffs. As I tried to free myself, I realized the hopelessness of my situation. The pipe was anchored in the concrete floor below and secured to a steel I-beam overhead. As I strained to hear, I sensed their movement into the master bedroom directly above me, accompanied by Flo's excited giggles. Shoes thudded onto the carpet above, and I heard hurried whispers urging the removal of garments. "Brian, I desire you greatly," Flo whispered urgently. My fury mounted as I continued to frantically struggle with the handcuffs. Above, the bed began to creak, and I imagined them engaging in closeness. I cursed the restraints and my disloyal wife overhead. My wrists grew raw and bloody from my relentless efforts. Emotions churned within me as Roger grunted and Flo moaned in unison. Then, silence blanketed the upstairs for a brief moment. Ceasing my struggles, I lay on the unforgiving cement floor, hands clasped around the pipe. A profound sadness settled in my heart as Flo exclaimed, "That was amazing, Roger. I'll have to admire your work again someday. Let's dress and check on Jim downstairs." "Sure, Flo, I need a breather. But Alice might return soon from that phony call I made, and I'd rather she not find us in bed together." Minutes later, footsteps echoed on the basement stairs, but I didn't lift my gaze as they neared my prone form. "Oh, damn, look at his wrists all bloody," Flo gasped. "Honey, it was just a prank. Nothing happened. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. Roger, hurry and unlock the cuffs so we can tend to his wrists. Oh, God, I never thought he'd take it this hard." Tears streamed down my face as Roger fumbled with the handcuff key. "Roger, hand Flo the key before you unlock me and run. Once I'm free, you'll regret ever being born," I warned, glaring at him. He met my gaze, wordlessly passing the key to Flo. As he edged toward the stairs, fear flickered in his eyes, while Flo began unlocking the handcuffs. Once the cuffs were off, I heard Roger's truck revving up, tires screeching as he peeled away. Rising to my feet, I peered down at Flo, still crouched on the floor, fear etched across her face. "You better find somewhere else to stay tonight or I could seriously hurt you. Call before you attempt to come home." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she grasped the magnitude of the pain she'd caused. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It was just a prank. We didn't do anything." "Flo, I don't want to hear excuses about it being a joke ever again. To me, it's as if you cheated. And that's all that matters now. From here on out, I'll treat it as infidelity and betrayal. Expect a call from my lawyer soon." "We're finished," I declared, turning and ascending the stairs. "No, Jim, please, nothing happened," she cried out from the basement. "What do I tell the kids?" I didn't respond, heading toward the front door. Just as I was getting into my car, a frantic Alice pulled into their driveway. "Where the hell is my lousy husband? There was no accident, and I didn't need an ambulance," she exclaimed as she stepped out of the car. Suddenly, she noticed my wrists. "What happened, Jim? Dear God, look at your wrists. Let me bandage them for you." Roger and Flo pulled another stunt, I sighed. "Alice, they've crossed the line this time. I'm divorcing Flo." "Oh God, what happened?" "You'll hear it from Flo and Roger. I'm heading home to take care of my wounds. Once there, you can inform my cheating ex-wife that she'll find her belongings on the porch. If she wants back in, she'll need a court order." "Oh God, what did they do?" Alice wailed, rushing into the house in distress. I climbed into my car, my anger simmering. Arriving home, I cleansed my wrists with antibacterial soap, applied ointment, and bandaged them. Methodically, I packed Flo's belongings into plastic bags, placing them outside. Ignoring the ringing phone, I focused on the task. After locking up, I undressed and lay on the bed, unable to sleep despite exhaustion. In the morning, the phone rang again, but I declined to answer. After showering and eating breakfast, I changed my bandages. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell chimed, and I peered out to find Alice on the doorstep. Inviting her in, I gestured for her to enter. "They really went too far this time, didn't they?" she remarked as she stepped inside. "Unfortunately, yes," I replied. "What's your plan?" she inquired. "As I told her, I'm filing for divorce. Yet they claim nothing happened. Just another one of their jokes." "Flo really wants to talk to you," Alice mentioned. "My perception is that they did it, and as far as I'm concerned, that's reality. I'll schedule a meeting with a divorce attorney first thing Monday," I responded calmly. "You're incredibly upset, aren't you? Can't you wait until you've cooled off before making such a drastic decision? You've invested nearly 24 years in each other. Don't you want to salvage anything?" she reasoned. "I won't tolerate being betrayed. I've warned Flo numerous times, and in my eyes, she betrayed me. It's over," I declared. "But they insist nothing actually happened. They just made it seem that way," Alice argued. "Their words are not proof. It felt as though it could have happened," I explained, "and they can't prove it didn't happen. So I have to trust my perception that it did." She showed no respect for me, I stated firmly. "Can't you hold off and seek counseling? Flo's devastated by this," Alice pleaded. "I warned her before, but she didn't listen," I retorted. "I've said my piece. Let the lawyer handle it. If you're content with Roger's involvement, that's your choice. But he better steer clear of me," I concluded. "I haven't decided what to do about Roger yet, but I hate to see our friendship end over this. Roger feels genuinely sorry and wants me to pass on his sincere apologies to you. Make it clear that our friendship is over," I insisted. "Although I'd like to stay friends, Alice, I think it's best if we don't see each other while you're still with him. Is there anything I can tell Flo to give her hope for your forgiveness? If she can prove she didn't sleep with Roger, I'll consider it. I don't trust Roger or her word that it was just a joke. I feel like it happened, and that's enough for me." "Okay, Jim, I'll let her know. I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too, Alice. Let me load Flo's things into your car so you can take them to her. I assume you still have it." "She's moving in with her sister this afternoon. Her sister lives on the other side of town. She's a widow and lives alone, so there's space for Flo, maybe indefinitely." After loading Flo's belongings into Alice's car, I waved her off, then returned to the house. First, I looked up a locksmith to change the locks. It occurred to me that if I went to work on Monday and Flo changed the locks, I'd end up locked out. I arranged for the locksmith to come the same day. Then I unplugged my phone and switched off my cell. I dedicated the entire day to household chores until the locksmith's arrival. Once he departed, I hopped into my car and made a trip to the local supermarket, stocking up on a few frozen dinners to sustain me for about a week. Upon returning to my now solitary home, I couldn't shake the absence of Flo after nearly 24 years together. However, my anger towards her and what she, along with Roger, had done, lingered. Around 7:30 that evening, while watching TV, the doorbell chimed. Peering out the window, I spotted Flo's sister Mary at the doorstep. "Hello, Mary," I greeted as I opened the door for her. "Hi, Jim. Can I have a moment of your time?" "Of course, Mary. Come on in," I welcomed. We proceeded to the living room where she settled into a seat while I asked if she wanted a drink. "A Coca-Cola would be fine," she requested. After fetching the drinks, I returned to the living room. "I suppose you know why I'm here?" she began after taking a sip. "Yes. Are you here to plead for her return? If so, you've come in vain," I responded bluntly. "No, she confided in me about everything. How are your wrists?" she inquired. "They're healing, scabbing over. No signs of infection," I informed her. "Flo will be relieved to hear that," Mary remarked. "She's on the brink of a breakdown, particularly because you refuse to speak with her. That's why I'm here, to deliver a message. Or rather, a few messages," she continued. "Very well, I'll hear your messages, but I can't promise anything in return," I stated. "Firstly, she loves you deeply and regrets her actions," Mary conveyed. "All right. Anything else?" I prompted. "She wants you to know she's willing to undergo a lie detector test to prove she's telling the truth. It's the only proof she can offer that nothing happened with Roger or anyone else," Mary disclosed. This proposition was a novel idea I hadn't considered. I pondered it for a moment while Mary observed me, sipping her cola. It sounds typical, but I have conditions. Firstly, proof that she didn't sleep with Roger doesn't guarantee reconciliation. Secondly, Roger must also undergo the same test, with matching results. Thirdly, I require approval from the test administrator for questions. Lastly, I won't cover the test expenses. That seems fair, Jim, but wouldn't you consider reconciliation more if the tests prove their honesty? No, she deeply wounded me. Even if I decide to take her back, it will take a long time to forgive her, I asserted. Understood, Jim. I'll convey your terms to her. I'm truly sorry. I intended to be furious with her for her foolishness when she came by this afternoon. However, she looked so distressed that I doubt anything I could say would worsen her state. She's aware of her grave mistake and the pain she's caused you. I'll give her some sleeping pills to help her rest tonight. Also, she contacted your children and confessed her actions. They seemed upset with her as she hasn't stopped crying since speaking with them. I should return to deliver your message. Thanks for the cola. No problem, Mary. I appreciate your concern. After her departure, I reflected on the situation. Some of my initial rage had subsided, allowing me to think more clearly about my desires. I decided to have a drink first, heading to my office where the drinks cabinet stood. Pouring myself half a glass of scotch, I added an ice cube in the kitchen. Without returning to my seat, I wandered the house, reminiscing about our shared married life. Did I truly want to end it all? My contemplation was interrupted by the doorbell ringing. Peering out the window, I spotted our daughter Patty standing at the front door, visibly discontent. Oh, I thought she might have realized the locks were changed and her key didn't work. Upon opening the door, Patty strode inside, casting me a hostile glance. What's up with the locks, Dad? And why are you ignoring calls? I had to drive 150 miles to get some answers. Sorry, Patty. I didn't mean to avoid talking to your mother. I heard from Aunt Mary that she briefed you on what happened. Yeah? And I'm really upset with you for kicking her out just because of a joke. Can't you forgive her and let her come home? When she phoned me to disclose her actions, I realized she acted foolishly. Patty, it transcended mere humor. I had previously cautioned her about the pranks she and Roger engaged in, but she disregarded my warnings. I couldn't glean much from Mom during our phone conversation, but I gathered it was intended as a jest. What could be so objectionable about that? I elaborated on the events, starting with the earlier lipstick smudge prank and our ensuing conversations. Then I recounted the more serious joke, revealing the scars on my wrists by rolling up my sleeves. Daddy, this is awful. Is that when you asked her to leave? Yes, it seemed like they might have had lovemaking. It sounded just like they described, and I know your mom's bedroom noises. Either that or they're exceptional actors. I believe they did it. That's my reality, unless she proves otherwise. I suggested your mom take a lie detector test, and Roger too. If the results prove true, I'll have to trust her. But it hurt deeply that she thought I'd find being betrayed a joke. I might not be able to reconcile with her. I'm really sorry about all this, Dad. I hope you and your mom can work through it because I love you both, despite what she did. I'm trying to make it work, baby, because I miss your mom dearly, but I'm still struggling with her lack of respect for me. Okay, Daddy, I understand now that I know what happened. I'm going to visit Mom and try to calm her down. I'll probably stay at Aunt Mary's tonight, and I have to return to school tomorrow. Please turn on your phone so I can reach you. Eric also wants to talk to you. He's working upstate and tried to call you after Mom contacted him. Sure, baby. I'll switch the phones back on once you're gone. Come here for a hug. I embraced her tightly, feeling how much she resembled her mother, which was both comforting and unsettling. I cherished her deeply. She'd always been my little girl. Goodbye, Daddy, she said, opening her car door. I waved as she drove off, then returned inside, resuming my solitary drink and turning my phones back on. A couple of days after Flo's sister Mary visited, she called to inform me that Flo had agreed to my terms for the lie detector test, and Roger had also consented. Roger offered to cover the cost of his test as a sign of remorse for his involvement in the prank. Mary also provided me with the contact information for the testing administrator. My anger towards Flo for her involvement in the prank had somewhat subsided, but I felt deeply despondent. If she truly loved me and hadn't been physically engaged with Roger, how could she participate in such a humiliating joke? I began to entertain the possibility that her love for me had waned, despite her claims of wanting reconciliation. It boiled down to whether I was willing to endure a loveless marriage if tests confirmed no carnal involvement. Flo attempted to reach out to me multiple times, but I promptly ended the calls upon hearing her voice. Subsequently, her sister acted as an intermediary, relaying Flo's apologies and desires to reconcile. However, I maintained my stance, insisting on awaiting the results of the lie detector tests before making any decisions. During this period, our son Eric fervently urged me to forgive his mother and allow her to return home. Despite my efforts to explain the situation and the hurt her actions caused, he struggled to comprehend my pain and persisted in his plea for her return. I realized that our relationship could become strained if we ended up divorcing. Thankfully, our daughter Patty showed more empathy and support for my situation. After Mary provided me with the test administrator's contact details, I reached out to legal and law enforcement acquaintances for insights. Reassured by their recommendations, I scheduled an appointment with the administrator, confident in his ability to conduct an impartial test. The following day, I discovered that Flo and Roger had already contacted the test administrator, Jack Harlan, and scheduled tests for both of them in 2 days. They designated me as an interested party authorized to control the questions asked. I informed my boss the next day about needing personal time and visited Jack Harlan's office. After explaining the situation to him, we discussed the questions he would pose to determine whether Flo and Roger had engaged in carnal activity. Jack assured me that he would ask the same questions to both parties, compile their responses, and provide a final written report. He agreed that matching test results from both would confirm no carnal activity. Had this not been the outcome, trust in Flo might have been irreparable, leading to inevitable divorce if the tests indicated lying. Returning to work, I felt more assured that clarity regarding any carnal involvement would soon emerge. Yet I acknowledged challenging decisions lay ahead. Over the next 3 days, I adhered to my usual work routine, staying late to avoid returning to an empty home. Evening meals were taken at a nearby diner, followed by whiskey at home, where sleep was elusive. The absence of Flo's warmth and love weighed heavily on me. Before the morning of the test, uncertainty lingered. However, a clear lie detector report would pave the way for Flo's return, with the assurance that she'd refrain from any more insensitive pranks, especially after seeing how deeply the last one affected me. The tranquility lasted until the phone rang just after 11. It was Alice. "Jim, it's Alice. I found something important. Roger's at the testing center. Can you come now?" Her tone sounded ominous, prompting me to rush next door. Following our usual routine, I entered through the front door and heard Alice's voice from the office. Inside, I found her at her desktop computer, wearing a concerned expression. "Jim, I need you to see this." I pulled up a chair beside her. "Jim, Roger's been acting secretive since Tuesday. A couple of times I caught him quickly minimizing something on the monitor when I passed by this door. Also, he tends to leave the room when he's on the phone. I'm pretty sure he spoke to Flo yesterday. This is my first chance to check our computer without him around." With that, Alice clicked on the Google icon, revealing his search history since Tuesday. My blood ran cold as I scanned through some of the research. There were 4 different searches on how to beat a lie detector test. Alice and I sat side by side, reading through many of the pages her husband had browsed. After digesting enough, we retreated to her living room to discuss our findings. Our conversation continued until we heard Roger's car pull up outside. As he entered and greeted us with a wary look, he took a seat on the couch opposite Alice and me. If I hadn't been observant, I might have missed the slight limp as he favored his left leg. "This was all the reassurance I needed, Roger. I believe you passed the test with flying colors. Honestly, I had a hunch nothing untoward happened that day," I remarked. Catching Alice's puzzled glance out of the corner of my eye, I realized I hadn't shared my plan with her yet. I spoke up. "If you promise that you and Flo will never pull another stunt like this again, I'm willing to let bygones be bygones and shake hands. Perhaps even skip reading the report altogether." Relief washed over his face as he readily gave his word. With a smile, I rose from my seat and approached him. As he extended his right hand, I took a step closer, firmly planting my foot on his right leg. The expected discomfort failed to register. Instead, his face drained of color as he let out a piercing scream, collapsing back onto the couch. Frantically, he used both hands to free his foot from under mine, eventually tearing off his shoe. Alice and I watched as the shoe came off, revealing blood-soaked socks. He continued to groan in pain. Glancing sideways at Alice, I saw her discomfort at the sight of blood. Keeping my gaze on her, I smiled as I noticed her realization. connecting our earlier reading with the wound on Roger's leg. I won't bother with the report because I know it'll be nonsense. Did you nail your shoe to press on it while answering their security questions, trying to mask your lies? It had to backfire eventually, didn't it? Trying to induce sweat and a faster heart rate with harmless questions, making the results appear truthful, I concluded. The anguish on Roger's face softened slightly, giving way to a look of despair as he glanced between me and Alice. Yeah, I did cheat, and I showed Flo how to do it, but not for the reason you're thinking. Seriously, man, he confessed. All right, Alice, brace yourself, I remarked as we both resumed our seats, and Roger gently applied pressure to his sole to staunch the bleeding. Observing Alice's disapproving expression at the mess on the floor, I briefly entertained the thought of suggesting that she make him clean the carpet with his tongue. To his credit, Roger remained silent, offering no attempt to dramatize this new revelation. We didn't know what questions you posed to the examiner. What's so complicated about asking if we had lovemaking? I interjected. Sure, we probably would have aced that one, but we were concerned you'd delve into something more subtle. Like what? I prodded further. Well, has our conduct always aligned with the standards of a marital relationship? Roger began, but before he could finish, Alice interjected angrily, indicating an obvious negative response to that query. Why else would you go to the trouble of sticking a damn nail in your shoe before the test? I pressed on. I'm guessing the fact that you arrived with the nail still lodged inside means you forgot to bring extra shoes or a pair of pliers. Planning ahead has never been your strong suit, has it? I added, addressing Alice as I spoke. Please, honey, I didn't want to lose you, Roger pleaded. And Flo certainly didn't want to lose Jim. So, dear husband, when and what did you do that wouldn't measure up to the standards of a marriage? Alice inquired, her tone stern. Roger shifted uncomfortably in his chair and responded in a subdued voice. It was that day we pretended to be fooling around upstairs. We were just jumping on the bed. As you can imagine, we were both fully clothed. He hurriedly clarified, explaining, we were bouncing on the bed, causing it to squeak. I can't even recall who initiated it, but somehow we began touching each other through our clothes. We both found it enjoyable. We were incredibly foolish. I felt a bit puzzled. I pride myself on being a good judge of character, and this rings true. If not, Roger is exceptionally skilled at conjuring excuses on the spot. I glanced at Alice. Is this satisfactory? I asked. Not even close, she retorted. This pair has demonstrated such proficiency in deception and scheming that I am far from convinced, Alice continued. Roger, tend to your leg, apply some antiseptic, bandage it, and then I suggest you leave. I need time to contemplate. Plus, there's the matter of cleaning up yet another one of your messes, Alice snapped, indicating a stain on the carpet near Roger's foot. Despite Roger's acting skills, the look of dread on his face betrayed his deep concern about the fate of his marriage. I have a video, Alice, he blurted out suddenly. What? I exclaimed simultaneously. We sounded like a twisted duet. I installed a camera in our bedroom before we handcuffed you in the basement. I captured everything, Roger confessed before I could react. Then why the hell didn't you mention this a few days ago? I demanded. Roger didn't need to respond to that question. If the video depicted them pleasuring each other even while fully clothed, it wouldn't be something two spouses eager to reconcile with their partners would want to share publicly. Personally, I strongly believe that the boundary of infidelity extends far beyond actual physical act. Any form of closeness, including a simple kiss on the lips, would constitute crossing a line that should not be crossed. I had the intention to do so, but Flo feared your reaction. We instructed Roger to tend to his leg, and then present us with the video. While Roger was out of the room, I sent Flo a message. I couldn't resist adding to her already mounting anxiety. Remove the nail from your shoe and come over to Alice's house. Roger is going to show us a video. Normally, it's just a minute's walk from Mary's house to ours, but it took a good 35 minutes before there was a knock on the door. Alice opened it and welcomed in Flo and her sister Mary. Flo's makeup was smudged, and her eyes were teary. Mary explained that my wife panicked as soon as she read my message, realizing that I had caught on to her little scheme. Flo appeared far less composed about the test results than Roger did upon his return home. Mary simply glanced at me and raised her eyebrows at Flo's further self-destructive behavior. Flo attempted to embrace me, but I guided her to sit beside me on the couch. She kept studying my expression, seemingly trying to gauge my feelings. I wondered if Mary had any inkling about the contents of the video. Alice and I didn't waste time during those 35 minutes. Our discussion centered around what our likely course of action would be if the video indeed confirmed Roger's claims. Alice had already made up her mind that she would likely forgive Roger for the bedroom incident, albeit after letting him stew for a bit. As for me, I was more conflicted. My initial emotional reaction was that my wife had betrayed me, something I had always deemed unforgivable. However, my logical reasoning was more composed. Flo had been an exemplary wife for 24 years, and our children had made it abundantly clear that they would be devastated if I didn't forgive her. A minute after everyone settled in, Roger arrived with his laptop. A USB flash drive protruded from one port while a cable emerged from the other. He positioned the computer next to the TV and powered it up. I found it odd that he didn't simply insert the flash drive directly into the TV. Then I recalled Alice's remark about his lack of tech savvy. Once the image on the computer screen synchronized with that on the TV, Roger muttered another apology and hit play. Flo kept her gaze averted from everyone in the room, including the TV. She was undoubtedly aware of my uncompromising stance on fidelity, making this an incredibly uncomfortable situation for her. Mary observed the screen intently, seemingly unaware of what was about to unfold. Roger appeared more at ease once again. He settled beside Alice and attempted to hold her hand, but she withdrew it. The clip, lasting about 10 minutes, essentially depicted what Roger had previously described. It was largely devoid of any eroticism. Within moments of its commencement, both protagonists appeared fully clothed, just as Roger had stated. Flo turned him onto his back, then positioned herself on top of him, echoing verbatim what I had heard while handcuffed in the basement. We observed that it was Roger who initiated the hand game, though Flo followed closely behind. This was incredibly difficult for me to witness for several reasons. Firstly, no man with any self-respect, apart from a few outliers, desires to witness his wife in such a scenario with another man. Secondly, it triggered painful PTSD as I relived the words that had devastated me less than a week ago. It reignited the burning and throbbing sensation in my wrists, a painful reminder of my inability to prevent what was unfolding in the room above me. Midway through, I shut my eyes tightly, attempting to block out the sounds. I didn't open them again until the room was filled with the silence that followed their shared climaxes. The silence felt deafening and all-encompassing. Even the normal sounds of breathing seemed absent within the room. I wasn't alone in my turmoil. Glancing at the screen, I saw Flo and Roger quickly separate. The video paused, revealing an empty bed before fading to black. The uncomfortable silence lingered in the room for several tense moments. Once the clip concluded, Mary cast a disgusted look at Flo, while Roger eyed Alice hopefully. Flo stared at a spot on the floor, her focus unwavering. The silence shattered when Alice abruptly rose to her feet, with Roger following suit. "You deceitful traitor," Alice's words cut through the air, shocking us all. It was the most severe thing I had ever heard her say, surpassing any prior expletives. Roger's expression betrayed his shock at her outburst. The sound of her open palm striking his cheek echoed like a fire shot. She was seething with anger. "I've never seen someone so enraged," I thought to myself, watching the scene unfold. But Alice wasn't finished. "Don't you dare touch me, you treacherous little scoundrel!" she seethed, her fury palpable. Roger dodged, narrowly avoiding a second slap. He winced, shifting his weight to his right leg, appearing bewildered. "This entire video is fabricated," he insisted. "But why? We had invited Jim and Flo over later that evening, hadn't we? We were planning to relax on the patio, right?" Alice's question came out more like a growl. "But due to the rain, we opted to stay indoors. Do you recall now?" Roger still seemed puzzled, but nodded along with Alice's explanation. Alice pointed angrily at the TV screen. "Look at this fool! The sunlight streaming through the window indicates it's not only a sunny day, but also morning. This window doesn't receive direct sunlight until noon. You concocted the entire story, didn't you?" Roger's expression shifted from confusion to horror. That was all the confirmation I needed of their deceit. The abrupt transition from contemplating forgiveness to a resolute decision was disorienting, and I detest feeling humiliated. I could and indeed concurred that there might be a valid reason for attempting to deceive a lie detector test. There was only one explanation. They tampered with the video. The following moments were tense. Flo let out a loud groan and fled out the door, while Mary sat there, stunned. Alice advanced towards Roger, who attempted to maneuver past me, using me as a shield. I took a single stride and exerted all my force as I brought my foot down on his injured leg. Instinctively, he doubled over, and as his head reached a near horizontal position, it met my knee coming the opposite direction, causing his head to back up, blood spraying from his flattened nose. He joined Flo in a hurried flight away from home, leaving the three of us locked in a grim tableau. Alice stood trembling, tears streaming down her face, a sentiment I could deeply relate to. For the second time in a week, the man I had loved unconditionally for nearly 25 years shattered my heart. The realization that this was the same person who had kept me hopeful between crises was doubly shocking. Mary remained seated, seemingly stunned by her sister's foolishness and likely horrified by the lies Flo undoubtedly fed her over the past week. I approached Alice and enveloped her in a hug. I held her as she trembled uncontrollably, mourning the demise of her marriage. I've always preferred to grieve in solitude, reserving it for later. But in this moment, I remained composed, clinically calm as one can be amidst chaos, already formulating a list of inquiries. I was already regretting letting Roger depart with only a broken nose. I glanced at Mary, pondering her reasons for staying. Was it to offer apologies for her role in this debacle, or was it due to her inability to tear her gaze away from the catastrophe unfolding before her? Unable to answer this without breaking my connection with Alice, which I had no intention of doing, I allowed my thoughts to race. It became apparent that Roger, while intelligent and adept at manipulation, was not as cunning as Alice. If she hadn't picked up on the sunlight clue at that moment, we might still be part of two successful couples. In hindsight, the doctored video was quite clever, yet I struggled to reconcile this with the fact that I was being deceived. I was certain that the soundtrack aligned perfectly with the words I had heard during that weekend, leading to an inevitable, logical conclusion. That certainty neatly fit into a slot in my mind, like the penultimate piece of a puzzle. They must have either overlaid the old soundtrack onto new visual footage or replicated the words and sounds in real time. Both scenarios were based on recordings made during the original incident. Suddenly, Roger's actions of playing the file through his laptop made sense. After giving Alice one final hug, I gently lowered her onto the couch and made my way to my laptop. I breathed a sigh of relief when I found it hadn't gone into sleep mode yet, which would have required a password to regain access. How silly, I chastised myself inwardly, realizing that if it had, I could have simply viewed the flash drive on another device. My mind was clearly foggy from everything that had transpired. With my fingers deftly navigating the keys and mouse, I closed the software and opened the video file displayed on the Explorer screen, revealing that we had just witnessed myself and Flo making 8. There were also files labeled 2 through 7. 2 more files caught my attention. One was titled Me and Flo Original, while the other was labeled Basement. I clicked on the latter, then scrolled along the progress bar. About 3/4 of the way through, I found myself suspended from that cursed bar in the basement, captured by an obviously hidden camera. I closed the clip, overwhelmed by the flood of unpleasant memories. The file labeled Original was significantly larger than the others. Seeing Alice's approving nod, I pressed play. It revealed a view overlooking Roger and Alice's bedroom. The perspective differed from video 8, prompting me to dash down the hallway to compare the two views. After about half a minute of detective work, I deduced that the original camera was likely concealed on a bookshelf, while subsequent versions were probably captured by a tripod-mounted camera at the foot of the bed. Upon returning to the living room, I noted that the timer at the bottom of the screen displayed 1 minute and 5 seconds, with over an hour remaining. It was evident that Roger lacked editing skills. I fast-forwarded to 20 minutes before the end, then progressed in 30-second intervals until the action began to backtrack 30 seconds. I settled onto the sofa beside Alice, clutching her hand for mutual support. Let's just say the original version differed significantly from the subsequent ones. The only commonality was that it all commenced with Flo pushing Roger onto his back. About 25 seconds later, I heard both Alice and Mary gasp simultaneously. Due to the camera angle, Flo's face came into view as she turned her head to the side, glancing down and to the left of the camera. In simpler terms, there was a grate at floor level that opened into a channel, carrying the crucial sounds of their prank to the basement below, where I was held captive. The expression on Flo's face, the one that caused the gasps, was repulsive. My wife knew precisely what I endured in the basement that night, and she relished it. My supposedly loving wife took pleasure in mentally tormenting me. I battled a strong urge to vomit. When Roger noticed where Flo's gaze was fixed on the screen, he smirked maliciously. He seemed too stunned to check the time, but a few seconds must have passed. We all observed as Roger turned Flo onto her back, kneeling beside her and fiddling with his belt and trousers. On the screen, Flo lifted her skirt and ripped off her underwear, tossing them aside. The remainder of the video unfolded pretty much as I had imagined it would during my time in the basement, with the benefit of hindsight. Flo's callous enjoyment of the situation likely emboldened Roger and triggered the subsequent chain of events. That being said, if I were a betting man, I'd wager that this was Roger and Flo's first encounter. The video certainly depicted how what began as a relatively innocent situation swiftly spiraled out of control. I was fairly certain that Roger realized he derived pleasure from witnessing someone else humiliated, but it was probable that Flo stumbled upon her kink that day. After the spectacle concluded, Mary inquired about the prospect of a future between Flo and me. Her demeanor suggested she wasn't hopeful. I paused for at least a minute to sort through my emotions. No, not in this lifetime, Mary. Ironically, if Flo had approached me later and explained that it started as a joke but escalated out of control, as it appeared in the original video, then perhaps I would have contemplated forgiveness. However, they colluded to rewrite history and outsmart the lie detector test. This level of deceit is beyond what I ever believed she was capable of. It makes me question how well I truly know her. What else has she lied to me about? Moreover, we haven't yet viewed all the workout videos. After her initial slip-up, she returned and engaged in at least one more physical, interaction with Roger. How many times did they engage in such activities during these workout sessions? Then there was the expression on her face. I'm sure you noticed it too, Mary. I'm sorry, Mary, but it's over between us. Mary nodded solemnly. Please refrain from publicly shaming her, Jim. It would only embarrass your children. If you provide me with a copy of the video, I'll calmly explain the situation to Mom and Dad, Flo, and even your children, if necessary. I nodded and expressed my gratitude. She departed sadly, but with determination in her expression. Alice had already opened the phone book to the legal section. Alice and I comforted each other for weeks. However, it became evident that any relationship is destined for painful memories, and we parted as friends. I was leaving her house late one night after once again providing her with comfort when I encountered an enraged Roger in her front yard. How could he ever hope to reconcile with Alice if I was visiting her 5 times a week? What a deluded fool. Glancing around for potential witnesses, I took great satisfaction in breaking his nose once more. I felt a sense of pride in myself. The memory of that sadistic grin on his face just before he destroyed my marriage would have been provocation enough. In the divorce proceedings, Alice practically crucified him when he demanded his share of the assets. With my full approval, she threatened to press charges for unlawful restraint, using the basement video as evidence. He cut his losses and vanished soon after. That was for the best. I might have been bluffing. I could have likely endured the public humiliation, and I wasn't concerned about Flo's reputation, but I didn't want to embarrass my children or Flo's extended family. Shortly after I gave Roger a bloody nose about a week after the video incident, Flo reached out, wondering if my decision not to share the video with her kids, family, and friends indicated a chance for us in the future. Her message, which only included one clip, suggested she was unaware that I had seen the original. She likely assumed Roger wouldn't be so careless as to keep all the incriminating evidence in one place. The message also reminded me that I hadn't sent the clips to Mary. I hadn't heard from my children that week, but given their self-absorption, was that really surprising? This also hinted at a lack of communication between Mary and Flo, perhaps due to Mary's anger or Flo's embarrassment. I called Mary to confirm she still wanted the video. She did. It was during that same conversation that I found out Flo had moved back in with her parents. When I burned both Take 8 and the original onto a DVD, I realized I hadn't actually watched takes 2 through 7. So I did. In doing so, they extinguished every remaining soft or forgiving part of my heart, turning it into unyielding concrete. To say they both lost control would be an understatement. The same look of disgust appeared on their faces as Flo had in the original version. I almost reconsidered and sent the clips to everyone in Flo's address book before I calmed down and thought about how it would impact my children. I tried to find Roger, but he had already skipped town. No, Flo won't be forgiven, and unfortunately, Roger won't get a third broken nose. I sent all the clips to Mary with a warning that if I heard any complaints about how I treated Flo, I'd release the entire video. She must have done a good job, because one by one, Flo's parents, Eric and Patty, called to tell me they understood why my marriage was over. Later on, I discovered that Mary recounted the entire ordeal to them and offered to show the clips as proof. Only Flo's mother took her up on the offer. Struggling to believe the narrative, she apparently became ill halfway through watching the original clip. Following this, Flo didn't contest the divorce. Through Mary, I found out she had found refuge from the toxic environment at her parents' house by renting a small apartment. I wasn't aiming to cheat her in the divorce. 24 solid years had to count for something, and I didn't want any repercussions from my children down the line. If and when they eventually forgave their mother, Flo sent me a sincere letter apologizing for her actions and attempted cover-up. The loneliness she expressed leaped off the pages. She pleaded for forgiveness, but more to reconcile with herself. Her appeals for me to forgive her for the sake of her parents, our children, and mutual friends nearly moved me to tears. Nearly. I wasn't seeking a replacement yet, but there was no shortage of single women vying for my attention. Ask any middle-aged woman about the availability of suitable, decent-looking men with good morals, and she'll paint a bleak picture. I'm looking forward to meeting new ones. And since I have no intention of marrying again, I anticipate many, many such encounters.
Story 5.
Connor Wakefield strode into the kitchen, his crisp suit a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. The smell of coffee permeated the room, but it did little to soften the cold atmosphere. Jocelyn sat at the table, her eyes glued to her phone, fingers tapping away at the screen. She barely glanced up as Connor entered. "Morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Jocelyn mumbled a response, not bothering to look up. Connor's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral as he poured himself a cup of coffee. The kids shuffled in, eyes still heavy with sleep. They took their seats at the table, the scraping of chairs against the floor the only sound breaking the uncomfortable silence. "So, any plans for today?" Connor asked, attempting to inject some normalcy into the morning routine. Jocelyn shrugged, her attention still fixed on her phone. "Nothing special." Connor's fingers tightened around his mug. He turned to the kids, forcing a smile. "How about you two? Excited for school?" Their responses were half-hearted at best, and soon the kitchen lapsed back into silence. Connor watched as Jocelyn rose from the table, depositing her mug in the sink without a word. The distance between them seemed to grow with each passing day, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the days passed, Connor found himself waking in the middle of the night more often than not. Tonight was no exception. He rolled over, his hand instinctively reaching for Jocelyn, only to find her side of the bed empty and cold. Connor sat up, blinking away the remnants of sleep as he checked his phone. No messages, no calls. He slipped out of bed, padding quietly through the darkened house. The kids' rooms were quiet, but Jocelyn was nowhere to be found. Connor made his way to the front window, peering out into the empty driveway. Jocelyn's car was gone. His stomach twisted as he stared into the night. This wasn't the first time she'd disappeared without explanation, and he had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be the last. Connor's mind raced, conjuring up scenarios, each worse than the last. He tried to push the thoughts away, but they clung to him like a shadow. The next evening, Connor found himself seated at the dinner table, surrounded by his family, yet feeling utterly alone. The kids chattered away, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension between their parents. Jocelyn smiled and nodded at their stories, but her eyes kept darting to her phone beneath the table. Connor watched her, his fork pushing food around his plate. He caught the quick movement of her thumb, the slight furrow of her brow as she read a message. His chest tightened, but he kept his face impassive. As the kids finished their meal and scampered off to their rooms, Connor cleared his throat. "So, where have you been lately?" he asked, his tone carefully casual. Jocelyn's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before skittering away. "Oh, just busy with work and friends. Nothing exciting." Connor nodded slowly, studying her face. "Right? It's just you've been out late a lot. I was wondering if everything was okay." "Everything's fine, Connor," Jocelyn said, her voice taking on an edge. "I don't need to report my every move to you, do I?" The words hung in the air between them, sharp and accusatory. Connor felt his temper flare, but he tamped it down. "Of course not," he said quietly. "I just miss you, that's all." Jocelyn's expression softened for a moment, guilt flashing across her features. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cool mask of indifference. "I'm right here, Connor. I don't know what else you want from me." She stood abruptly, gathering the plates and stalking off to the kitchen. Connor remained at the table, his mind churning. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and he was determined to find out what it was. A few days later, Connor found himself alone in the living room, Jocelyn's phone lying innocently on the coffee table. He hesitated for a moment, his conscience warring with his growing suspicion. In the end, curiosity won out. He picked up the phone, telling himself he was just going to check the time. As he unlocked the screen, a notification popped up. A text message from Brady Vance. Connor's breath caught in his throat. He knew Brady, a colleague from work, charming and successful. The preview of the message was innocent enough, but something about it set off alarm bells in Connor's mind. He tapped on the message, his heart racing as he scrolled through the conversation. The texts were friendly, perhaps too friendly. There was an easy familiarity in their banter, inside jokes and casual plans to meet for coffee. Connor's stomach churned as he realized how frequently they were in contact. He heard Jocelyn's footsteps approaching and quickly locked the phone, setting it back on the table. As she entered the room, he forced a smile, but his mind was reeling. The seed of doubt had been planted, and Connor knew it would only grow from here. The following weekend found Connor and Jocelyn at a colleague's house for a dinner party. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter, but Connor barely heard any of it. His attention was focused solely on Jocelyn and Brady Vance, who had arrived separately but gravitated towards each other almost immediately. Connor watched as they chatted, their bodies angled towards each other, oblivious to the rest of the party. Brady leaned in close to whisper something in Jocelyn's ear, and she threw her head back in laughter, her hand resting on his arm for just a moment too long. "Can I get you a refill?" Brady asked, gesturing to Jocelyn's empty wine glass. She smiled, a warm, intimate smile that Connor hadn't seen directed at him in months. "That would be lovely, thank you." As Brady moved towards the bar, Jocelyn's eyes followed him, a softness in her expression that made Connor's blood boil. He clenched his fist, his nails digging into his palm as he fought to maintain his composure. The evening dragged on, each moment feeling like an eternity as Connor watched his wife and Brady dance around each other. Their stolen glances, the way they seemed to find any excuse to touch, it all confirmed what Connor had begun to suspect. Something was happening between them, something that threatened to tear his world apart. As they drove home that night, the silence in the car was deafening. Jocelyn stared out the window, a small smile playing on her lips. Connor gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white with the effort of controlling his emotions. "Did you have a good time?" he asked, his voice strained. Jocelyn turned to him, her expression guarded. "It was fine." "Why?" Connor shrugged, keeping his eyes on the road. "You seem to be enjoying yourself, especially with Brady." He saw Jocelyn stiffen out of the corner of his eye. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Connor said, his tone carefully neutral. "Just an observation." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, the unspoken accusations hanging heavily between them. Days passed, and Connor found himself consumed by suspicion and doubt. He began paying closer attention to Jocelyn's comings and goings, noting the time she was out late, the vague explanations she offered. Each inconsistency, each half-truth, only served to fuel his growing certainty that something was terribly wrong. One evening, as Jocelyn showered, Connor made a decision that would change everything. He picked up her phone, his heart pounding as he unlocked it. He went straight to her messages with Brady, steeling himself for what he might find. As he scrolled through the conversation, Connor felt his world crumbling around him. The messages were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Plans to meet at hotels, intimate details of their encounters, declarations of love and passion. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. His hands shaking, Connor navigated to the photo gallery. There, hidden in a folder marked work, he found what he was looking for. A picture of Jocelyn and Brady together, arms wrapped around each other, their faces flushed with happiness and desire. The intimacy of the image felt like a physical blow. Connor set the phone down, his mind reeling. The shower stopped, and he could hear Jocelyn moving around in the bathroom. In that moment, he made a decision. He wouldn't confront her, wouldn't give in to the rage and pain that threatened to overwhelm him. No, he would be smarter than that. He would make her pay, make them both pay, for their betrayal. As Jocelyn emerged from the bathroom, Connor was the picture of calm, greeting her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She had no idea that in that moment, he was already plotting her downfall. Connor stood in the shadows of his study, watching Jocelyn through the half-open door. She sat in the living room, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a table lamp. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now darted around the room, settling on him with a mix of suspicion and fear. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Connor pulled it out, careful to angle the screen away from Jocelyn's line of sight. A message from Quinn Mercer lit up the display. Everything's set for Saturday. Jay will never know what hit her. A slight smile tugged at the corner of Connor's mouth. He quickly pocketed the phone, but not before catching Jocelyn's narrowed gaze. The weight of her stare pressed against him, heavy with unspoken accusations. Connor strode into the living room, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. "Busy day tomorrow," he said, voice carefully neutral. "I should turn in early." Jocelyn's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. "Another late night at the office?" "You know how it is this time of year," Connor replied, shrugging. "The Anderson account isn't going to close itself." "Right," Jocelyn muttered, taking a long sip of wine. "The Anderson account." Connor paused at the foot of the stairs, studying his wife. The lines around her eyes had deepened, etched by worry and guilt. "Good. Let her stew in it." "Don't wait up," he called over his shoulder, ascending the stairs without a backward glance. Later that night, Connor's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the bedside clock, 11:47 p.m. Jocelyn's soft snores filled the bedroom. Carefully, he slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to his study. "Quinn," he answered, keeping his voice low. "Everything okay?" "Just finalizing the details for Saturday." Quinn's voice crackled through the speaker. "You sure about this, Connor?" "Once we set this in motion, I'm sure." He cut her off, steel in his tone. She made her choice. Now it's time to face the consequences. A soft laugh from Quinn. "You're ice cold. You know that? I almost feel bad for her." "Save your pity," Connor growled. "She doesn't deserve it." They spoke for a few more minutes, voices hushed and words carefully chosen. As Connor ended the call, a floorboard creaked outside the study. He froze, listening intently. Soft footsteps retreated down the hallway. Jocelyn. Connor allowed himself a grim smile. Let her wonder. Let her imagine the worst. It was nothing compared to the truth she'd have to face soon enough. The next morning, tension crackled between them like static electricity. Jocelyn's eyes were rimmed with red, her movements jerky as she poured coffee. "Sleep well?" Connor asked, voice dripping with false concern. Jocelyn's hand trembled, sloshing coffee onto the counter. "Fine," she snapped, grabbing a dish towel. "You, like a baby," Connor replied, taking a sip from his mug. "Though I thought I heard you up and about in the night. Everything okay?" Jocelyn's eyes flashed to his face, searching for, what? Guilt? Deception? Connor kept his expression neutral, a mask of innocence. I couldn't sleep," Jocelyn muttered, turning away. "Must have been that extra glass of wine." Connor hummed, unconvinced. "Well, I'm off. Big day at the office." He leaned in to kiss her cheek, noting how she stiffened at his touch. As he pulled away, Connor caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne musky, with hints of sandalwood. Rage boiled in his gut, but he tamped it down. Soon, she'd pay for every lie, every betrayal. "Don't work too hard," Jocelyn called as he headed for the door, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness. Connor paused, hand on the doorknob. "Oh, I won't," he replied, allowing a hint of ice to creep into his tone. "But I may be late again." "Don't wait up." He closed the door behind him, counting down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue. He heard the muffled sound of Jocelyn's sobs from inside the house. Perfect. The day crawled by, each tick of the clock bringing Connor closer to his endgame. He made a show of working diligently, fielding calls and poring over spreadsheets. To any observer, he was the picture of a dedicated employee. But his mind was elsewhere, imagining Jocelyn's mounting paranoia. Was she searching the house for evidence? Scrolling through his text messages? Calling his colleagues to verify his whereabouts? Let her search. Let her doubt. The seeds of suspicion he'd planted were blossoming into full-blown panic. He was sure of it. At precisely 5:47 p.m., Connor's phone buzzed. A text from Quinn. Jay spotted at Harlow's. With him. Green light. Connor's fingers flew across the keyboard. Proceed. He leaned back in his chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. The trap was set. Now to spring it, Connor left the office at 7:30 p.m., making sure to wave goodbye to the night security guard. He drove home, parking his car in the driveway, as usual. But instead of going inside, he slipped around to the back of the house, using his key to enter silently through the mudroom. The house was dark, save for a sliver of light spilling from beneath the door of Jocelyn's home office. Connor crept closer, ears straining. The rapid click-clack of computer keys reached him, punctuated by frustrated sighs. He peered through the keyhole. Jocelyn sat hunched over her laptop, hair disheveled, eyes wild. She was scrolling frantically through something. His email? Their bank statements? Come on, she muttered, voice thick with desperation. There has to be something. Connor's lip curled in disgust. How pathetic she looked, scrabbling for proof of his non-existent affair, while her own indiscretions went unacknowledged. He retreated to the kitchen, making a show of entering through the front door. Honey, I'm home, he called out, injecting false cheer into his voice. A crash from the office, followed by hurried footsteps. Jocelyn appeared in the doorway, face flushed, trying to smooth her rumpled blouse. Connor, I didn't hear you come in. He raised an eyebrow. Everything okay? You look a little frazzled. Jocelyn forced a brittle laugh. Oh, you know me. Always burning the midnight oil. How was your day? Productive, Connor replied, shrugging off his jacket. Yours? A flicker of guilt crossed Jocelyn's face. Fine. Just fine. I made dinner. It's keeping warm in the oven if you're hungry. Connor nodded, heading for the kitchen. Sounds great. I'm starving. Dinner was a tense affair, loaded with unspoken accusations and thinly veiled barbs. Connor watched as Jocelyn pushed food around her plate, barely eating. Not hungry? He asked, feigning concern. Jocelyn's fork clattered against her plate. I had a late lunch, she muttered, avoiding his gaze. Connor nodded, taking a sip of wine. With Quinn, perhaps? Jocelyn's head snapped up, eyes wide. What? No, why would you think that? Connor shrugged, the picture of nonchalance. No reason. You two seem to be spending a lot of time together lately. It's nice that you've become such good friends. Right, Jocelyn said, voice tight. Friends. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Connor savored every moment of Jocelyn's discomfort, watching as she fidgeted in her seat. Finally, Jocelyn stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her wine glass. I'm not feeling well, she announced. I think I'll turn in early. Connor nodded, his face a mask of concern. Of course. Feel better, darling. As Jocelyn fled the room, Connor allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. The spiral had begun. It was only a matter of time before she cracked completely. The next few days passed in a blur of calculated moves and countermoves. Connor made sure to leave just enough breadcrumbs to keep Jocelyn's suspicions alive, a lingering touch on Quinn's arm at a charity event, a hush phone call that ended abruptly when Jocelyn entered the room. He watched with grim satisfaction as Jocelyn unraveled before his eyes. Dark circles appeared beneath her eyes. Her hands shook constantly, and her temper frayed at the slightest provocation. One evening, as Connor sat in his study reviewing some paperwork, a notification popped up on his computer screen. It was an alert from the spyware he'd installed on Jocelyn's devices. She was accessing his email account. Leaning back in his chair, Connor allowed himself a moment of pure, vindictive pleasure. He imagined Jocelyn hunched over her laptop, desperately searching for evidence of his betrayal. Little did she know, the real betrayal was much closer to home. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Come in, he called, quickly minimizing the alert window. Jocelyn entered, her movements hesitant. She looked like a shadow of her former self. Hair unkempt, clothes rumpled, eyes darting nervously around the room. "Connor," she began, voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk?" He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Jocelyn perched on the edge of the seat, hands twisting in her lap. I've been thinking about us, about our marriage." Connor leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Oh, and what conclusions have you drawn? Are you—" Jocelyn swallowed hard, seeming to steel herself. "Are you having an affair with Quinn?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation and fear. Connor allowed the silence to stretch, watching as Jocelyn squirmed under his gaze. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Why would you ask me that, Jocelyn?" She flinched at his tone, but pressed on. "I've seen the way you look at her. The texts, the late-night phone calls. Don't deny it, Connor. I know something's going on." Connor stood slowly, circling around the desk. Jocelyn shrank back in her chair as he loomed over her. "You know something's going on?" he repeated, voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's rich, coming from you." Confusion flickered across Jocelyn's face. What do you mean?" Connor's hand shot out, gripping her arm. Jocelyn gasped, more in surprise than pain. "Don't play dumb with me," he snarled. "You think I don't know about your little afternoon rendezvous? The secret meetings? The hushed phone calls?" Jocelyn's face drained of color. "Connor, I don't know what you're talking about." "No." Connor released her arm, stepping back. "Then perhaps you'd care to explain why you reek of another man's cologne?" Jocelyn's hand flew to her neck, eyes wide with panic. It's not what you think." "Oh, I think it's exactly what I think," Connor spat. "How long, Jocelyn? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" Tears spilled down Jocelyn's cheeks. "Connor, please. Let me explain." But Connor was beyond listening. Months of carefully controlled rage burst forth, his voice rising to a shout. "Explain what? How you've made a fool of me? How you've thrown away our marriage for some cheap thrill?" Jocelyn sobbed, her whole body shaking. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything, I swear." Connor laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Didn't mean anything? Is that supposed to make me feel better?" He turned away, unable to look at her pathetic, sniveling form any longer. "Get out," he said, voice cold as ice. "I can't even stand to look at you right now." Jocelyn stumbled to her feet, reaching for him. "Connor, please. We can work through this. I'll do anything." "I said get out." Connor roared, whirling back to face her. Jocelyn recoiled as if she'd been slapped, fleeing from the room in tears. As the sound of her sobs faded down the hallway, Connor sank into his chair, a mix of emotions churning in his gut. Anger, disgust, triumph, and underneath it all, a flicker of something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like doubt. Had he gone too far? Was this really what he wanted? Connor shook his head, banishing the traitorous thoughts. No. Jocelyn had made her choice. Now she would face the consequences. The next morning, Connor woke early, his mind already racing with the day's plans. He dressed quickly and quietly, careful not to wake Jocelyn, who had finally fallen into a fitful sleep just before dawn. As he made his way downstairs, Connor's phone buzzed. A text from Quinn. "Everything's set. You sure about this?" Connor's thumb hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Was he sure? The events of last night flickered through his mind, Jocelyn's tears, her pleas for forgiveness. For a brief instant, he considered calling it all off. But then he remembered the look on her face when he'd confronted her. The guilt, the fear, the knowledge that she'd been caught. No, there was no going back now. "I'm sure," he typed back. "Proceed as planned." Connor pocketed his phone and headed for the kitchen. As he brewed a pot of coffee, he heard Jocelyn stirring upstairs. Good. Let her come down. Let her face him in the harsh light of day. Footsteps on the stairs, hesitant and slow. Jocelyn appeared in the doorway, looking as if she'd aged a decade overnight. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair a tangled mess. "Connor," she began, voice hoarse. "Can we talk? Please?" He turned to face her, leaning against the counter with a mug of coffee in hand. About what, Jocelyn? Your affair? Or my supposed indiscretions with Quinn? Jocelyn flinched at his tone, but pressed on. Both. Neither. I don't know. I can't go on like this. We need to clear the air. Connor took a long sip of coffee, regarding her over the rim of the mug. Fine, he said finally. Talk. Jocelyn sank into a chair at the kitchen table, hands trembling as she pushed her hair back from her face. I made a terrible mistake, she began. I never meant for it to happen. It was just, Brady was there, and you were so distant, and Brady, Connor interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Brady Vance? My colleague and supposed friend. Jocelyn's eyes widened in horror as she realized her slip. Yes. But Connor, please believe me. It didn't mean anything. It was a moment of weakness. Nothing more. Connor set his mug down with exaggerated care, his knuckles white from the force of his grip. A moment of weakness, he repeated, each word dripping with contempt. And how many moments of weakness were there, exactly? Jocelyn's face crumpled. It doesn't matter. It's over now. I ended it weeks ago. Connor's laugh was sharp and humorless. Weeks ago? And when, exactly, were you planning on telling me? I wanted to, Jocelyn whispered, tears streaming down her face. But I was afraid of losing you, of destroying our family. I thought if I could just put it behind me, we could move forward. Connor slammed his mug down on the counter, coffee sloshing over the rim. Jocelyn jumped at the sudden noise. Move forward, he snarled. You betrayed me, Jocelyn. You betrayed our vows, our trust, everything we've built together. And you thought we could just move forward like nothing happened? Jocelyn stood, reaching out to him. Connor, please. I know I've hurt you terribly, but I love you. We can work through this, go to counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on us. For a moment, Connor wavered. The pain in Jocelyn's eyes was real, her remorse palpable. A part of him, buried deep beneath layers of anger and betrayal, ached to take her in his arms, to forgive and forget. But then he thought of all the nights he'd lain awake, wondering where she was, who she was with. The casual lies, the subtle deflections, the way she'd looked at Brady across crowded rooms, thinking no one noticed. His resolve hardened. It's too late for that, he said, voice cold as ice. You made your choice, Jocelyn. Now it's time to face the consequences. Confusion flickered across Jocelyn's tear-stained face. What? What do you mean? Connor's phone buzzed in his pocket. Right on cue. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Why don't you ask Brady, he said, tossing the phone to Jocelyn. She caught it reflexively, staring down at the display. Her face drained of color as she read the message from Quinn. It's done. Brady confessed everything to his wife. She's on her way to your house now. Jocelyn's head snapped up, eyes wide with horror. Connor, what have you done? A cruel smile twisted Connor's lips. Me? I haven't done anything. You're the one who couldn't keep it in your pants, remember? The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Jocelyn flinched at the sound, looking like a cornered animal. That'll be Melissa, Connor said, moving towards the door. Brady's wife. I think the two of you have a lot to discuss, don't you? Connor, wait, Jocelyn cried, panic rising in her voice. Please don't do this. We can talk about this, just the two of us. But Connor was already opening the door, revealing a red-faced, furious Melissa Vance on the doorstep. Where is she? Melissa demanded, pushing past Connor into the house. Her eyes locked onto Jocelyn, who stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. You, Melissa spat. You home-wrecking bitch. Connor stepped back, watching as Melissa advanced on Jocelyn. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for, planning for. The complete and utter destruction of Jocelyn's carefully constructed world. So, why did it feel so hollow? Jocelyn's pleading voice cut through his thoughts. Melissa, please. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Melissa's laugh was bitter and broken. A mistake? Is that what you call fucking my husband for months? Destroying our marriage, our family? Connor watched as Jocelyn crumpled under the weight of Melissa's accusations, each word striking like a physical blow. He should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, a sick feeling churned in his gut. "I trusted you," Melissa continued, her voice rising to a shout. "We were friends. How could you do this to me? To our children?" At the mention of children, Connor felt something inside him crack. He thought of his own kids, blissfully unaware upstairs. What would this do to them? How would they be affected by the fallout of this ugly confrontation? "Enough," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Both women turned to look at him, startled by his intervention. "Melissa, I think you should go." Melissa gaped at him. "Go? But I thought you said I should come over, that I deserved to know the truth." "And now you do," Connor replied, gently but firmly steering her towards the door. "But this isn't the way to handle it. Not here, not like this." As he ushered a protesting Melissa out, Connor caught sight of Jocelyn. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms wrapped tightly around herself, looking small and broken. For the first time since discovering her affair, Connor felt a flicker of something other than anger towards her. Pity, perhaps, or the ghost of the love they once shared. Closing the door behind Melissa, Connor leaned his forehead against the cool wood, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline of confrontation was fading, leaving him feeling hollow and uncertain. He turned back to face Jocelyn, who hadn't moved from her spot in the kitchen. Their eyes met across the room, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. "Why?" Jocelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why did you stop her?" Connor ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling every one of his years. "Because this isn't who we are," he said finally. "Or at least, it's not who we should be." Jocelyn took a hesitant step towards him. What happens now? It was the question Connor had been avoiding, the one he'd pushed aside in his single-minded pursuit of revenge. What had happened now? Could they move past this, rebuild what had been broken? Or was the damage too severe? The trust too shattered? "I don't know," he admitted, the words heavy on his tongue. "I honestly don't know." Jocelyn nodded, a mix of fear and hope flickering in her eyes. "But we'll figure it out? Together?" Connor hesitated, weighing the anger and hurt that still simmered within him against the years of shared history, the family they'd built. Finally, he nodded. "Together," he agreed, the word a tentative peace offering. "But Jocelyn," he added, his voice hardening slightly, "no more lies. No more secrets. If we're going to have any chance of moving forward, it has to be with complete honesty." Jocelyn's shoulders sagged with relief. "Agreed," she said, wiping away a stray tear. "No more lies." As they stood there, the morning sun streaming through the windows, Connor realized that this was far from over. There would be hard conversations, painful truths to face, trust to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. But for now, in this moment, they had taken the first step, away from the spiral of suspicion and revenge, and towards what? Reconciliation? Forgiveness? Connor wasn't sure. But as he looked at Jocelyn, seeing both the woman who had betrayed him and the woman he had loved for so many years, he knew one thing for certain. The real work was just beginning. Connor stood in the master bedroom, his hands steady as he buttoned up his crisp white shirt. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. He paused, catching sight of his reflection in the mirror. His face was a mask of calm determination, betraying none of the turmoil that had consumed him for months. The sound of running water from the en-suite bathroom reminded him of Jocelyn's presence. His jaw clenched involuntarily. He reached for his phone, fingers flying across the screen as he typed out a message to his lawyer. "It's time. File the papers." The reply came almost instantly. "Understood. I'll have everything ready within the hour." Connor pocketed his phone just as Jocelyn emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel. She offered him a tentative smile, but he turned away, pretending to busy himself with his cufflinks. "Connor," her voice was hesitant. "Can we talk about last night?" He kept his back to her, his voice level and cold. "There's nothing to discuss, Jocelyn. You made your choices. Now we both have to live with the consequences." "But I'm late for a meeting," he cut her off, striding out of the room without a backward glance. As he descended the stairs, Connor heard the muffled sound of Jocelyn's sob. He paused for a moment, his hand gripping the banister tightly. Then he squared his shoulders and continued down, each step taking him further from the life he once knew and closer to his carefully orchestrated revenge. The drive to his office was a blur of traffic lights and honking horns. Connor's mind raced, reviewing each step of his plan. By the time he pulled into his reserved parking spot, his lawyer had already sent over the finalized divorce papers for his review. Connor spent the morning poring over the documents, ensuring every detail was in place. The prenuptial agreement they'd signed years ago would be his ace in the hole. Jocelyn's confession of infidelity, recorded without her knowledge, would seal her fate. At precisely 2:15 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text from the process server he'd hired. Papers delivered. Mission accomplished. Connor allowed himself a small, grim smile. He imagined Jocelyn's face as she was served the divorce papers, the shock and disbelief that would wash over her. It was a moment he'd dreamed of for months, ever since he'd first discovered her betrayal. He didn't have to wait long for the fallout. His phone exploded with notifications, missed calls, and frantic text messages from Jocelyn. "Connor, please! We need to talk about this. Answer your phone. You can't do this. I'm begging you, don't throw away our marriage." He ignored them all, focusing instead on his next move. The custody battle would be brutal, but he was prepared. Connor pulled up a carefully curated file on his computer, filled with evidence of Jocelyn's erratic behavior over the past few months. Her growing paranoia, her neglect of their children as she became more entangled with Brady. It was all meticulously documented. As the day wore on, Connor maintained his composure, even as his colleagues shot him concerned glances. By the time he left the office, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He loosened his tie as he drove home, steeling himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. The house was eerily quiet when he entered. Connor made his way to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of scotch. He'd barely taken a sip when he heard Jocelyn's footsteps behind him. "How could you?" Her voice was raw, thick with tears and anger. Connor turned slowly, meeting her red-rimmed eyes with a cold stare. "I think you know exactly how, Jocelyn. You made it remarkably easy. But our family, our children don't." He cut her off sharply. "Don't you dare use our children as a shield. You should have thought about them before you decided to fuck Brady Vance." Jocelyn flinched at his words, her face crumpling. "I made a mistake, Connor. A terrible mistake. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can dash. There is no E anymore," Connor interrupted, his voice flat. "You destroyed that the moment you decided our vows meant nothing." "It wasn't like that," Jocelyn protested, reaching out to grab his arm. Connor jerked away from her touch. "I love you, Connor. It was a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." Connor laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the kitchen. "A moment of weakness that lasted for months? Do you really expect me to believe that?" Jocelyn's eyes widened. You knew? "For how long?" "Long enough," Connor replied, taking another sip of his scotch. "Long enough to gather all the evidence I needed to ensure you lose everything." The color drained from Jocelyn's face. "What are you talking about?" Connor set down his glass, fixing her with a steely gaze. "The prenup, Jocelyn. Remember that little document you signed? The one that specified what would happen in case of infidelity." He watched as realization dawned on her face. "I'm taking the house, the cars, and I'm going for full custody of the kids." "You can't," Jocelyn cried, her voice rising in panic. "You can't take my children from me." "Watch me," Connor growled. "I have recordings of your confession. I have evidence of your negligence, your instability. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation." Jocelyn stumbled backward, her legs hitting a kitchen chair. She collapsed into it, her body shaking with sobs. "Please, Connor. I'll do anything. Just please don't take my babies." For a moment, Connor felt a flicker of something. Pity, perhaps, or a ghost of the love he once felt for her. But he squashed it ruthlessly, remembering the nights he'd lain awake, imagining her in Brady's arms. "You should have thought of that before," he said coldly. "I suggest you start looking for a good lawyer, Jocelyn. You're going to need one. With that, Connor turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jocelyn's broken sobs behind him. He climbed the stairs to their bedroom, his bedroom now, and began packing Jocelyn's things into suitcases. Each item he touched brought back memories. The silk blouse he bought her for their anniversary, the perfume she wore on their first date. Connor pushed the sentimentality aside, focusing on the task at hand. By the time he was done, several suitcases lined the hallway. He heard Jocelyn's footsteps on the stairs and braced himself for another confrontation. But she just stood in the doorway, staring at the packed bags with hollow eyes. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered. Connor shrugged, not meeting her gaze. "That's not my problem anymore. You have until tomorrow evening to get your things and leave. After that, I'm changing the locks." Jocelyn nodded numbly, her fight seemingly drained. She moved to the closet, pulling out more clothes and tossing them haphazardly into an open suitcase. They worked in silence. The only sounds the rustle of fabric and the occasional sniffle from Jocelyn. As the night wore on, the reality of their situation seemed to settle over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, well past midnight, Jocelyn zipped up the last suitcase. She stood in the middle of the room, looking lost and small. "What do we tell the kids?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Connor's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it. You could say goodbye to them before you leave tomorrow, but that's it until the custody hearing." Jocelyn's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Connor, please. They need their mother. They need stability," Connor snapped. "They need a parent who puts them first, not someone who's too busy sneaking around with her lover to notice her family falling apart." His words hit Jocelyn like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, catching herself on the edge of the bed. "I never meant to hurt them," she whispered. "Or you. I got lost somewhere along the way." For a moment, Connor felt his resolve waver. The woman before him bore little resemblance to the confident, vivacious Jocelyn he'd fallen in love with. But then he remembered the nights he'd spent alone, the lies she'd told with a smile on her face, and his heart hardened once more. "Get some sleep," he said gruffly. "You can use the guest room. I want you gone by 6 tomorrow evening." Without waiting for a response, Connor turned and left the room. He made his way downstairs to his home office, locking the door behind him. Only then did he allow his carefully maintained facade to crack. He sank into his leather chair, his head in his hands. The weight of what he was doing, the lives he was about to shatter, pressed down on him. But there was no turning back now. He'd set this plan in motion, and he would see it through to the bitter end. Connor reached for his phone, dialing a familiar number. It rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. "Connor? It's the middle of the night. What's wrong?" "Quinn," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "It's done. I need you to be ready for the next phase." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Quinn spoke again, her voice was fully alert. "Of course. What do you need me to do?" "Jocelyn will try to reach out to you. When she does, you need to distance yourself. Act shocked, horrified by what she's done. Make her believe you're on my side." "Are you sure about this, Connor?" Quinn asked, a note of hesitation in her voice. "It seems cruel." Connor's grip on the phone tightened. "She made her choice, Quinn. Now she has to live with the consequences. Can I count on you?" Another pause, longer this time. "Then yes, you can count on me." "Good," Connor said, relief flooding through him. "I'll be in touch." He ended the call, leaning back in his chair. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. A new day was dawning, and with it, the next phase of Connor's carefully orchestrated revenge. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and tense encounters. Connor threw himself into his work, using it as a shield against the emotional storm raging around him. He watched with grim satisfaction as Jocelyn's world crumbled piece by piece. The custody battle became the centerpiece of their divorce proceedings. Connor's lawyer presented a damning case against Jocelyn, painting her as an unstable and negligent mother. Text messages, photos, and a detailed timeline of her affair with Brady were laid out for the court to see. Connor sat stoically through it all, his face a mask of calm determination. He could feel Jocelyn's eyes on him, pleading silently, but he refused to meet her gaze. This was war, and he intended to emerge victorious. Jocelyn's attempts to fight back were feeble at best. Her accusations of Connor's supposed affair with Quinn fell flat, dismissed as paranoid ravings of a guilty woman. With each passing day, Connor could see the fight draining out of her. The final blow came when Brady Vance, sensing the impending disaster, cut ties with Jocelyn. Connor overheard a heated phone conversation one evening as he was picking up the last of Jocelyn's things from the house. "Brady, please." Jocelyn's voice was desperate, echoing from the guest room. "I need you. I've lost everything." There was a pause, then a strangled sob. "What do you mean it was never meant to last?" "I left my husband for you." Connor lingered in the hallway, listening as Jocelyn's world fell apart even further. Part of him felt a twinge of pity, but he squashed it ruthlessly. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The day of the final custody hearing arrived, bringing with it a sense of foreboding. Connor adjusted his tie as he stood outside the courtroom, his lawyer running through last-minute details. "Remember," his lawyer said, "stay calm, no matter what Jocelyn or her attorney might say. We have a solid case. The judge will see that you're the more stable parent." Connor nodded, his jaw set. As they entered the courtroom, he caught sight of Jocelyn. She looked pale and drawn, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Connor saw a flicker of something: fear, regret, desperation before he turned away. The hearing was brutal. Connor's lawyer systematically dismantled Jocelyn's character, presenting evidence of her affair, her erratic behavior, and her neglect of the children. Jocelyn's responses were weak, her voice trembling as she tried to defend herself. "Your Honor," she pleaded at one point, "I made a mistake, but I love my children. They need their mother." The judge's face remained impassive. "Mrs. Brennan, the evidence presented here today paints a very different picture. Your actions show a pattern of putting your own desires above the needs of your children." Connor watched as Jocelyn crumpled in her seat, tears streaming down her face. He felt a momentary urge to comfort her, a muscle memory from years of marriage. But he remained still, his face a mask of indifference. When the judge delivered his ruling, the courtroom fell silent. "In light of the evidence presented, I find it in the best interest of the children to award full custody to Mr. Brennan. Mrs. Brennan will be granted supervised visitation, to be reviewed in 6 months." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Connor exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of triumph and an unexpected hollowness. He'd won, but the victory felt oddly empty. Jocelyn's anguished cry broke the silence. "No, please, you can't take my babies." Connor watched as she collapsed, her body racked with sobs. Her lawyer attempted to comfort her, but she shrugged him off, her eyes wild with grief and desperation. As the courtroom began to clear, Connor stood, buttoning his jacket. He paused for a moment, looking at the broken woman who had once been his wife. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving the echoes of Jocelyn's sobs behind him. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Connor threw himself into creating a new normal for himself and the children. He hired a nanny, rearranged his work schedule, and did his best to shield the kids from the turmoil of the divorce. But late at night, when the house was quiet and still, doubts began to creep in. Had he gone too far? The look in Jocelyn's eyes as the judge delivered his ruling haunted him. He'd wanted justice, revenge even, but had he crossed a line? These thoughts plagued him as he stood in the empty family home, watching as the last of Jocelyn's belongings were loaded into a moving truck. The house felt cavernous now, echoing with memories of happier times. Connor made his way to the back porch, a glass of scotch in hand. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the well-manicured lawn. In the distance, he could hear the children laughing as they played with the nanny. He sank into a chair, the weight of the past months settling heavily on his shoulders. He had everything he'd fought for: the house, the kids, his reputation intact. Jocelyn was gone, her life in shambles. It was a complete victory. And yet, as he sat there in the growing darkness, Connor felt a deep, gnawing emptiness. The man who had embarked on this journey of vengeance seemed like a stranger now. He'd won the battle, but at what cost? The sound of the children's laughter drifted to him again, and Connor closed his eyes. He'd done all of this for them, he told himself, to protect them, to give them stability. But as he sat alone on the porch of their too-quiet home, he wondered if they would thank him for it one day, or if they would resent him for tearing their family apart. The sky darkened, stars beginning to twinkle overhead. Connor remained on the porch, lost in thought, the ice in his untouched scotch slowly melting. The victory he'd fought so hard for tasted like ashes in his mouth. In the end, he realized there were no real winners in this war of hearts. Only casualties, and the long, lonely road of rebuilding what had been so thoroughly destroyed.